It appears.
Hmm?
Before you put it in session.
Miguel? How many offers we have done so far? Ready?
The House will resume.
The House is now resumed.
And
When the House was
suspension
suspended, was taken, we were in Finance Committee. To that, we should return.
The House is now in Standing Finance Committee. We resume at Head 36. The Minister and his team is welcome. We have 45 minutes left on this head, and we resume with the Honourable Member for St. Philip South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I first want to start by commending the Minister and his team at BWA for the tremendous amount of good work that they have done over the past almost 2 years since he became the minister. I'm doing that consciously knowing that I have had several complaints, not only in St. Philip South, but right across St. Philip. And I've been able to get those handled expeditiously. Things like fixing leaks, for example, addressing issues with water bills for the most vulnerable people in St. Philip, and of course, coming to the need of those who would have had burst mains at their meters and needed a solution. So kudos to you and your team. I think it is very, very inspiring to know that the Barbados Water Authority has moved to a level where there is some change in the way things are being done at the Water Authority. However, there are some things that still remain as a humbug to me as an MP, and certainly to many of the residents of St. Philip. And I speak of St. Philip simply because I traverse the entire parish. And given my history in St. Philip, I am oftentimes consulted on matters affecting the people of St. Philip. You repair the mains, you repair the leaks, but oftentimes holes are left in the road and are left for extended periods and are not being addressed. And this then leads to a further humbug because then people have problems with the cars, the suspensions, etc. And I am wondering what is the strategy for dealing with matters like these, because, for example, it appears to me that it would be a very seamless thing that if you know you're going to fix a leak and you're going to have to dig up the road, then that there should be a simple transition into patching that road immediately following. But what happens is that oftentimes 2 months, 3 months, 4 months And I have a case that dates back to June last year, where the road is still not fixed. And even though it was reported to the Barbados Water Authority, it's still not being addressed. Now, I don't want to treat to this as a criticism, but more importantly, to understand what is the strategy in dealing with these things, how you can propose to address it, so that what appears simple to me ought to be simple to everybody else at the Barbados Water Authority.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Just to contextualize your concerns, I will admit that they're not localized to St. Philip. This is perhaps one of the most difficult things that we are battling with. Quite often, we respond to burst mains as an emergency because the main is burst, the water is flowing, probably affecting districts with water being off, and the priority is to get that main fixed as quick as possible and resume normal service. That is challenging enough as it is, and the Water Authority had a problem over the last couple of years, predating our administration. And these are some of the issues that the chairman alluded to when she explained the financial situation of the Barbados Water Authority. But the road reinstatement, that's what we call it, the reinstatement of the road after fixing the main has been a difficulty because that used to be sent out to private contractors. But the Water Authority found itself in a position where we could not keep current with those bills, so nobody wanted to do any work for the Water Authority unless they got the money up front, and the Water Authority was simply not in a position to do it. So you had a situation where you would rush to fix the pipe because it was an emergency, and then they'd either leave the hole there or backfill the hole with what came out of the hole. But if you don't seal that down, the next rain is going to wash it out. So, Honourable Member, this is an issue that is not, as I said, not localized to St. Philip. This is one that has affected us across the length and breadth of Barbados. Indeed, the Honourable Member for St. Thomas has, on multiple occasions, I don't want to say threatened, but explained to me that she's coming after me personally if for some reason her or any of her family drop into some hole that was wrong a corner in St. Thomas. So we have a program to deal with it. We have started to address a lot of it, but I think the best person to nail this one down is Mr. Halliday.
Thank you and good afternoon, Madam Chair, Honourable Minister. Yes, our Minister has actually summed it up quite well. We have had this as a perennial challenge for the last several years, if not decades. And truth be told, the issue of reinstatement, which is principally the one that you're speaking to, has vacillated significantly between private contractors, the BWA, and MTW on occasions. And indeed, our issue is simply a financial one. And particularly as it relates to the small contractors who are often reliant on us for very timely payments, and that we have not simply been able to do for quite some time. So in our recent discussions with the Ministry of Transportation and Works, we have again determined that we will work with that ministry as best as we can to address the reinstatements in as timely fashion as we can. But the reality as well outside of finance is that whenever we're responding to burst mains overnight or in quick order, we're not always able to mobilize the repair of those roads. Indeed, on every occasion, we seek as much as we can to compact and fill those roads, but then the actual surfacing of the road may sometimes take a while. So we are actually in discussion with the Ministry of Transportation and Works, as far as I'm aware, to try and fix that. And to bring it down to the granular level, for the moment, we're working with it on a week-by-week basis in terms of the supply of that information to that department or that ministry to see how best we can work together to address the timeliness, if nothing else, for the reinstatement of those roads.
And just in relation to that as well, although we're getting assistance from the Ministry of Transport and Works in this regard, it is not free because they do invoice us for it. So it appears on our books as a debt from the Water Authority to the Ministry of Transport and Works. So we have to be very careful about how we rack up those debts with everything else that we're going through and the restrictions that we're under. But it is a concern that is noted, it's a concern that is top of mind for us. and it's something that we're working on, trying hard to address. What people will realize is that in the last couple months, in particular, especially with our extended hours program, we've been trying as much as possible to reinstate the road. Once we fix the breach, quite often you don't reinstate immediately. You check to make sure that the breach is fixed and it holds it back up to water, the pressure in the main, before you reinstate. But we're looking to reinstate within 24 to 48 hours now as much as we can.
So my follow-up comment and question will be, the good work you're doing can be thwarted simply because it seems to me that how you prioritize basically will be dependent on how the overall strategy for treating to the delivery of water to Barbadians is being viewed. I note that your general manager said that this has been going on for several years. So if it has been going on for several years and you are aware of it, you're doing good work now. How is it that this wasn't prioritized at the point in time when a decision was going to be made to put up a structure at Pine East West Boulevard? And if we can quantify what that structure actually cost the BWA and compare it to what it would cost to deliver this service and actually at the same time empower those small contractors.
I take your point entirely. I do believe in many things. Public life is dictated by priorities. And the construction of the building, as grand as it is and as comfortable as we are housed in it, should not have been a priority over the more immediate concerns of the Water Authority in carrying out its mandate to provide safe, efficient, reliable, potable water to Barbados and to keep our systems running properly. I guess when the chairman outlines some of the costs involved there, I think your questions will actually answer themselves. So, Chair.
Madam Chair, Minister, thank you for your question. As I would have indicated during the session yesterday, the Barbados Water Authority found itself in reviewing only 20 contracts thus far, in a situation where the overall expenditure cost to the Barbados Water Authority would have been $1.5 billion. At that point in time, as I indicated, those contracts would have been signed at a level way beyond the management and became known after the fact. So for instance, we have a situation where we have smart meters that aren't actually smart, simply because the codes required to read the meters was removed at the 99th hour from the contract at a reduced price that makes absolutely no sense. The meters then covers were purchased for the meters. Those covers were underground covers, whereas the meters are above ground meters, and those covers cost the Barbados Water Authority $5 million that cannot be used.
All of which are laying littered around the bell and exposed to the elements, and we can't sell them back on to anybody because they're branded Barbados Water Authority.
Then there were consultancy fees for a company that also totaled $5 million, being the same company that was contracted to purchase or contracted to provide the covers.
I'd rather not do that now.
And so the truth was, at the level of the decision-making process, unfortunately, the interest of the people of Barbados was not the priority to which it is being given now, where we are very much mindful of our responsibility to the people to ensure, and that's why I say, I often read in the newspaper and hear people talk about the Barbados Water Authority, and the Barbados Water Authority should do this or should do that. And the truth is, one of the things that I've learned, because this is my first session here, is the importance of information and communication. Because the reality is, so much money was expended that the day-to-day operations of the Barbados Water Authority was not attended to. I would have alluded yesterday to the fact that we are seeking desperately right now to actually accumulate a stock to be able to change out or repair when mains get bursts, when we have to change a pump, when we have to deal with outages. We were only able recently to purchase surge protectors, which, given the instability in electricity from time to time, you'd figure would have been a priority. But it simply wasn't. So when people say, you know, the Barbados Water Authority is incompetent, they're not. The team that is there, they work very hard. And as a matter of fact, I think they are some of the most resourceful individuals because they had to do so much with so little. The building's cost was over $65 million. And within it, there were provisions. So, for instance, within the building's cost, there were contracts there that make absolutely no sense. And we've been working with the Office of the Attorney General as well as the Auditor General's Office to bring to justice and to recoup some of what was lost. And it was it's monumental, the amount that was lost. And in the process, the day-to-day concerns, the ability to repair roads and reservoirs. I mean, we've had, with the help of the government, been able to fly in pumps on commercial aircraft so that we would be able to give water. And that's why sometimes I say, you know, when things settle, and I am not sure when that'll be, but the story needs to be told. The story needs to be told because right now, the people who are at the Barbados Water Authority are dedicated, resourceful, hardworking, and have been the recipients of much criticism that was never of their making. It was way beyond the level that exists now.
Madam Chair, I also have a question with regard to energy, but based on what I just heard from the chairman, I just wanted to comment that it would be useful at some point in time to see a quantitative analysis of what the building actually cost at the time when the decision was made, based on the priorities of the Water Authority that remain outstanding, including the provision of water for northern Barbados, and the swift repair to what is referred to as the digouts, and how it impacted on the small contractors who benefited from that, because I strongly believe this is something that Barbadians ought to know the true story about, rather than a piecemeal approach to disseminating that information. And this is by no means an indictment on what you all are doing. It simply speaks to being able to give us comprehensive analyses on things that took place where we came in functioning office and how they would have hindered how we were able to progress. My question with regard to energy is to do with the provision of natural gas. And I reference St. Philip again because I am aware that over 15 years, the residents of a part of St. Philip called Ruby Park, which is an area that has what you would refer to as very high-profile individuals, or what Barbadians refer to as returning nationals. And you will find that from Crane right through to Union Development, from Crane right through to where the Sam Lawrence project is going to be, and that there's the Long Bear Road that has now been repaired, even though it's taken an extended period, but I will deal with that another time. And right in the middle of all of the provision of natural gas, Ruby Park is left out. So I am asking, how do you plan strategically to address issues like this, because to me it would have been more cost effective to have included Ruby Park, since you would benefit from the scale of purchase, and that then the methodology employed to just drill around that area and then have to come back, to me would create a greater cost. My question is this ever going to be addressed? Is there a plan in place for it? And how soon after 15 years of people asking or more can it be addressed?
I'm going to ask Mr. Ian Bradshaw, the manager of finance, to address that one.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, honorable ministers. The reality is that the National Petroleum Corporation understands that it's our mandate to provide the natural gas to as many Barbadians as possible. However, the reality is that we are a our cash reserves are limited, and we have to be mindful of the provision of a safe, reliable service to our existing customers. We try wherever possible to expand our grid, and we've been able to, thus far, reach 8 of the 11 parishes, and we have approximately 361 miles of main. And we would hope that we can use the collaboration with the Ministry of Public Works or private contractors to further give that service to as many persons as possible. We agree that there are some areas that the natural gas may run in the main artery of the parish, but may not extend throughout the districts. Our technical staff will continue to provide surveys to see where it is logistically possible to do so. But at this time, we are unable to extend the corporation's grid to areas outside of areas that have a commercial entity, because that commercial entity is what serves to support and augment the supply of service to our domestic customers. The reality is that our commercial entities provide over 77% of our revenue, and we use that revenue in many ways to expand our grid wherever possible. As was earlier said by our CEO, the recovery of that investment sometimes take in excess of 30 years. So we appreciate that. We would like to give the natural gas service to more Barbadians, but we are mindful of the fact that, similar to our colleagues at the Water Authority, we at this time have to put our capital resources into the areas of maintenance at this time.
I fully endorse what you're saying, but my question was specific to strategic planning, because right around the area, there's a provision of natural gas. It would occur to me that it would have been more cost effective to go right through than to have to come back and start a process over. So I asked the question in terms of strategic planning. I know that when your GM spoke earlier today, he mentioned the costs of procuring the supplies like the pipes, etc. I understand scale, and I understand what it would take if you do things in bulk vis-a-vis doing them in small bits. So that my question spoke directly to strategic planning. But I get your answer, and I understand what you've been saying. To my mind, though, strategic planning in something where I can use this as a good example, but not just me, the people who are impacted by it as well, cite the same example. And so therefore it might be good not just to focus on this one, but in future to focus on how you're planning so that you get it right the first time. Always, if you have to come back a second time to fix something that would have taken a little more planning, it is far more expensive. And so that's the reason why I raised the question, because the GM mentioned the cost of the provision of the service and the laying of the pipes, etc.
Honorable Minister, we do appreciate what you've said, and we're taking it on board. Our strategy has always been to be as prudent in our execution as possible, but in reality, sometimes to provide the natural gas service to a significant area of any one district may require us to execute that service in phases. So what we might have done in certain parishes of the island is that we would have hoped to have supplied the entire area with the provision of gas, but matters of lack of capital to work at that time may have not allowed us to execute the entire area as we would have wished. Our natural gas revenues have been impacted significantly in recent times due to the increase of the product. Some 25% of the provision of the LNG gas, and in more recent times we've seen a marginal increase in our local supply. And these two factors significantly have inhibited our ability to expand into more areas and to, as we would say, fully capitalize on the initial investment of putting it into the main artery.
Let me add something to that, honorable member. When the natural gas facility in Barbados was first introduced, the natural gas was being supplied from local sources. So natural gas is a byproduct of drilling for oil. So when you're drilling for oil, the natural gas is released. That's why you see on CNN sometimes if they're showing oil fields, you see flames shooting up in the air. That's because they have to burn off, they have to flare off the natural gas because it comes out when the oil is being pumped. Now, because of the initial expansion of the natural gas program, we had a lot of customers on because the gas was relatively cheap. It was being sold cheaply in Barbados. It was sourced cheaply from Barbados. Our natural gas demand is such that we now have to import natural gas to cover the demand. The natural gas that we import is significantly, in terms of times more, than the cost of the natural gas in Barbados. But we didn't want to raise the price of the natural gas in Barbados. So what has happened is that the customers are enjoying the same low rate, and the company is effectively subsidizing the cost of the natural gas supply to Barbadians. So we're doing a delicate balancing act with the customer base that we have now. If we have to expand that customer base, knowing that we're going to have to import the natural gas to service the new customers, then the cost as well goes up. So it may not, with the model that we have and the cost structure that we have, to expand that customer base now doesn't make sense because the company is going to incur losses. For us to expand to everybody who wants, we're going to have to charge realistic or at least costs to cover our costs of the supply, which means the cost of supplying or connecting people is going to go up, right? And the cost of the delivery of the service is also going to go up. The other thing is, the model is, I'm here, the supply ends here. If it is where the honorable member, Minister King is, and all of you want natural gas, if Mr. King is a commercial entity and he says, hey, I want to connect to natural gas service, we then charge Minister King for the connection from here to there, and we then connect all the people along that line off at a significantly lower cost. If we can't get a commercial entity effectively to underwrite the cost of the connections, it is difficult for us to do it unless the residents of an area are willing to pay the actual cost of laying the pipe and connecting. So it can work in developments, because the developer himself may pay for the infrastructural costs of putting it in and recoup that on the sale of the lots. But for established developments, people now get charged, I think, $400 and something to connect, 400 something. If we were to charge what it actually costs, then everybody would be paying about $1,800 for the connection. So unless we get a corporate entity or a commercial customer who wants a service and is willing to pay for the connection to them, it is difficult for us to expand that network. And even if we do, we still have the issue that we're now importing the natural gas to cover the shortfall. And we're having difficulty passing that cost, that increased cost, onto the customer.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Michael.
Go ahead.
I just want to add one more point. My minister said it really well. He knows the natural gas business really well. But there are some opportunities as well. We are currently working with the Light and Power, Barbados Light and Power, and looking at a bridging project to ensure the resilient factor of the country after 2030. So in the event that we can substantiate a natural gas project, a large natural gas project, which is to fuel electric generation, we should be able to provide natural gas. But it is based on the fact that we have a very large scale customer that we will be able to provide more service to the rest of the public. But that's based on if we can realize that project.
I'll remember for St. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me join my fellow honourable members in thanking the Barbados Water Authority for an outstanding job. I would want to particularly thank the Customer Services Manager responsible for the St. Michael West Central area, Melanie Haynes, who has done and responded to every concern we've had. I found her to be very responsive, very positive, and most of all, very cooperative. And it says to me that there is clearly a change of culture and the way we do business at the Barbados Water Authority. So I want to say thanks to the chairman, management, and staff for what I consider to be an outstanding job thus far. Madam Chair, I want to go back to the issue of natural gas. Most of my constituents still consider natural gas to be perhaps the safest mode of distribution. And the residents of St. Michael West Central would like an explanation as to why they oftentimes note that there's natural gas on a main street, but they can't get natural gas into their district. For example, on Fairfield Road, the residents of Gaskin, they want to see natural gas going into these areas. And I understand, and I heard what was said before, but I also am sensing that clearly there is a commercial opportunity for the National Petroleum Corporation. Because if I were in their position, I would want to find out what is the cost of installing natural gas per kilometer or per mile. Because the one issue that we have is that oftentimes the residents simply do not understand why is it that you have natural gas on the main street, but you can't get it through the street that adjoins the main street. So if it's at all possible, if the National Petroleum Corporation can tell us what is the cost of connecting natural gas or installing natural gas per kilometer, and perhaps maybe would the National Petroleum Corporation consider this as a wonderful commercial opportunity. I understand the issue of cost of importation. I would like to get the numbers so we can readily attend to them, and to look and see if there's a variance. Perhaps if we can start a communication campaign to explain to residents, this is the cost per kilometer. If, for example, if it's $5,000 to install natural gas in the street, if you have 100 residents in that area, yes, this is what it's going to cost you per household. And let's see if we can get distribution of natural gas going to these areas. I would perhaps pause there and come back with my follow-up questions.
I can give you the answer for that. We estimate it's $100 a foot. So for 5,200 feet, that's approximately $500,000 for 1 mile. Normally, it's not financially feasible. We've done the exercise with regards to what the actual cost per customer. To cover the cost, it's over $4, 4 times as much as we charge right now. The customer is not willing to pay a 10% charge or even a 20% charge. We wouldn't expect them to pay 400% of the cost of the natural gas. So we've done the exercise already. We've understood clearly that it is not the amount of houses in the neighborhood. It is if it's actually anchored by a commercial entity, a commercial project. All of our projects we do financial analysis on. We do If it's a particular road, we would look to see where the main is, and you do the financial analysis, and it only works when it's anchored by a commercial entity. Now, sometimes you will see that MPC goes on the road, and then you miss a gap also. But when you do the calculate, it's better to have at least piece than none at all. We have currently 22,000 customers, and you also have to bear the fact that the price of natural gas was not increased between 1991 and 2017. That's the span, and all that time the cost of living, the cost of installation, everything went up, whereas the cost of natural gas stood still. So the capital and the savings required to install, to undertake a capital expansion program was never there. So, you know, and I can see that we've also had a growth pattern throughout the company, 3% growth per year. So while not having a rate increase for all these years, we still were able to increase the customer base by 3% at least per year.
And I understand that, but I really, since there are analyses, I would perhaps encourage the MPC to walk with me in the constituency so that we can, for example, go off Fairfield, and if we were to go in, for example, to Gaskin Road, and we can calculate the cost. I'm not sure if these are rates based on mechanical or routine labor. I have not had a chance to distill. I won't take you into that detail. And if we were to do trenching works, how much would the cost? But I really believe that the time has come where we need to have a conversation with the people, because it is something that, as a member of parliament, I continue to be bombarded by concerns about the fact that you don't have natural gas. And if we obviously can get the cost, if we can measure it, and cost of installation, and obviously, like I said, we want to see if this is more based, more labor intensive or perhaps more mechanical, and we can get down. And if it's a commercial opportunity, accept the issue, the fact that you've not had a rate increase. But if I think we can have a conversation, like I said before, with the people and say, this is the cost of installing natural gas in a particular area, this is the cost of the monthly billing or per consumption cost for natural gas, and then let the people make the decision. Because you have quite a few elderly people within the constituency, and they have to pay people to get bottled gas. And sometimes you have to weigh the cost versus the benefit. So perhaps that time has come. But I would certainly want to invite the MPC officials and the minister to tour areas of the constituency with me, so that they can see firsthand and hear firsthand from the residents, and perhaps have a conversation with the people in the hope of having natural gas being pipelined to the respective areas.
What I can say in answer to that, and I appreciate your concern, because it's not just you that gets it. I guess it's all of us, and I get it as well, because being the minister responsible for natural gas in the MPC, my constituents don't understand why you don't just send the MPC out to connect them. So I probably get it more than anybody else. Having said that, the MPC will be happy to work with you to give an estimate. And the reality is, if we actually found that district in Barbados that the residents are prepared to put together and cover the cost of the installation, I don't think the MPC will have a difficulty in installing the service. I mean, we still have the issue of the increased cost on subsidizing extra customers on the line. But the reason a lot of developments have it is because it's a closed unit, and the developers are prepared to expend that upfront cost to connect their people and then factor that into the cost of their sale price of the house or the land. So I can arrange to have the MPC go with you, go with the honourable member, sorry, madam, go with the honourable member, and give an estimate as to what it will cost to connect the district that he's talking about. And after that cost has been worked out and calculated and shared, then if the honourable member manages to raise the resources or convince the residents of the area to upfront the money, then we'll be more than happy to install the service.
To all credit to you, I remember you coming with the same explanation last estimates, when you offered to, if the residents were willing to join together, that y'all were willing to put in. I remember that well. Anything else, honourable member?
No, I really want to thank the minister. I will take up the minister and the MPC on the offer to tour the constituency, because I too would like to have an understanding of it and to see the commercial and see, because to my mind, I think is a wonderful opportunity to help with the distribution of natural gas. And if price is the issue, then we'll have to address that. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. George North, you have 3 minutes per question. St. James North, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be short. Minister, I would want to carry us back a bit to as a follow-up to what the Attorney General had asked this morning, Honourable Attorney General, in terms of generators. And as you're aware, I would have met with your team last month in preparation for this year's hurricane season, as I did last year, and with other stakeholders involved in the preparation of our country for the season in building resilience. And yes, the issue of generators is a concern. Your ministry has done well in increasing the capacity from what it was 2 years ago when we came into office. We found a start inadequacy of generators around the various pumping stations, but we are still not at full capacity. I think it was mentioned by Mr. Leslie maybe that we still need generators at about 30 remaining pumping stations, and this is clearly a concern, especially as this is connected with electrical supply and all of that. And you know, we have that problem and that issue, and I'm just wondering if you do have money in your estimates for this year to close that gap in terms of the amount of generators that we do require to build resilience in our country for hurricane season. I know that last year, for instance, on the last day of the estimates, if I remember it was, or just after, we did bring a supplementary to Parliament to give the Water Authority $2 million to build resilience in terms of capacity for, I think it was both generators and water supply. And so I'm asking if we do have that in the estimates. I know, of course, I think Mr. Leslie quoted a figure of about 4.5 million to buy the remaining generators. I believe I was told 5 million when we met last month, but you know, I am concerned, of course, as Minister, with responsibility for Home Affairs in terms of us building greater capacity and building greater resilience.
I thank the honourable member for his question, and I guess this is where my ministry starts to affect yours. Madam Chair, the difficulty that we have is there are a lot of projects that require the attention of the Barbados Water Authority, and they're all urgent. I appreciate and understand the need to build resilience in and for the generation capacity. There is a small amount in our estimates for generation, but being quite frank with you, the amount in the estimates can't begin to service the deficit that we do have. As it stands on the Barbados Water Authority is off of central government's book, so the bulk of matters for the Barbados Water Authority will not appear in the estimates. The Water Authority has to self-fund. We have, because of emerging and emergency situations, we have had to use a lot of the resources of the Water Authority to address things as they arise. When we had the knockout situation with the Hampton pumping station where 10 of the pumps went down, we weren't expecting to have to replace 10 pumps, but we had to do it, otherwise the water would still be off. When road works were the drainage works were being done on Highway 1, and the road had been excavated, it made no sense to allow the road to be closed back up without laying the mains one time that we were planning to do. We had not planned to do them at that time, but we then had to take all of the pipe in stock and lay it down Highway 1. So we then had a pipe deficit. We are trying to do the vineyard project, trying to get some funding for it, but until such time as we get the funding, we are going to have to finance the vineyard project to alleviate the issues in St. Joseph out of pocket. And the list goes on and on. The reservoir situation where we found the crisis with the reservoirs early last year, and we then had to do the emergency construction of a number of reservoirs. I mean, people will see the massive reservoir going up out by Fort George, also Lodge Hill and Boscobel, right? Those were unplanned for expenses that sucked all of the money out of the coffers of the Barbados Water Authority. So with the best will in the world, every single day it is something new. So we would love to have the complete generation capacity at all of our installations, and that's what we're aiming at. But our reality is that we would make the best plan in the world, and if we actually had the money, we'd put aside that money for it, but something else is going to crop up. So we have to do them incrementally, playing the hand that we've been dealt with, and trying to stretch our very, very scarce resources to make as much different in as many aspects as we can possibly deal with. But specifically, I guess Mr. Halliday has a better handle on the actual. Mr. Halliday, just quickly supplement that and I wrap up.
Through you, Madam Chair, Minister Hinkson, I just want to emphasize that at core for the Barbados Water Authority is the issue or concept of resilience. And we may, at some point in time, need to broaden the conversation beyond that of generation capacity. But certainly where we're concerned, yes, funding has always been an issue. And even for the funding that we required last year in respect of preparing for these emergency procedures, we weren't able to get the required funding, and therefore we are still backpedaling somewhat in terms of trying to get there. I would say that notwithstanding, we have made considerable progress in terms of generation installation capacity. We have installed all lightning rods, or rather lightning rods at all of our facilities. We have installed surge suppressors at arresters at all of our facilities. And we are discovering that we still have some challenges. And to that extent, we've actually been working with the Barbados Light and Power on three separate areas from a collaborative standpoint. But the chief one that applies to the conversation that we're having now would be that of the quality of electricity provision to our stations, and particularly those that are affected critically that we've observed over the last several years, because we've been managing or watching the trend. Thank you.
Any more questions? Honourable Member for St. Philip West.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, I want to thank you for explaining in great detail the problems you face with the natural gas. Understanding full well that my constituency is at the heart of the Barbados National Oil Company Limited, and it stretches from there in Woodburn all the way across to the airport. And I've been inundated with requests for natural gas. So thank you very much for explaining to them. But I want to take you back to an issue which I've heard on a number of occasions in Barbados, where the whole idea of desalination, and there seems to be always the concern of cost. And you spoke about it yesterday. I think it was when you spoke about the energy cost to do it. Now, I've been doing some research of my own on some solutions that are happening across the world, and the Tesla Inc. company has just started a number of initiatives in places like Samoa, Southern Australia, using a lithium-ion Powerwall battery, and they have a larger industrial type that they're using to power parts of the world. Have you, at any point in time, investigated these possibilities to drive those types of machinery that you would need for it? And also, there is in Barbados, as the minister responsible for the creative economy, I come across people every day who are in the business of renewable energy. In fact, there is a company that is actually seeking to create these same batteries as the Tesla company is doing. And I say that also to, again, alert you to the fact that I remember Minister Griffith, I think it was, spoke about having a solution for sporting places, such as, you know, basketball courts and pavilions and stuff. And you mentioned that the size of the PVs were not good for putting it on some of the roofs that we have. But I've also seen places where you have PVs that are like shingles, smaller ones, and maybe those are some of the solutions that we may want to examine and see if we can use those. Because if we're supposed to meet these targets by 2030, I think the time is now for us to really look at all of the different solutions to reach there. Thank you.
I'll just take the second one first and then turn the first question over to Mr. Leslie. It's not that the size of the PVs were not good for the roofs, it's that the roofs were not good for anything. So the size of the PV, whether it be shingle or otherwise, the roof was still compromised to sufficient extent that the roof had to be upgraded. With respect to the solar shingles, we were looking to test some of those. I think we were actually looking at Ilaro Court to do it. That technology exists. It is becoming a bit more mainstream now, so we're looking at all of these options, trying to find the best fit for Barbados, because some of the shingles actually, the hurricane rating of the shingles is higher than the PV panels. So we're looking at all of that. It's a work in, every day is something else. It's a work in progress there. I'm going to ask Mr. Leslie to address the other aspect.
Good afternoon, Minister. Thank you for your question. In relation to the desalination, as you mentioned earlier, the Barbados Water Authority has been looking at a number of options. As we indicated yesterday, desalination is one of them that we will be using or be looking to use to augment our water supplies. Desalination, as you correctly said, it utilizes a lot more energy than the traditional means. And we've been looking at ways in which we can reduce that energy. You mentioned the batteries. We've been looking at batteries, but batteries can power equipment for only so long, and then you have to recharge them again. So we've been looking at how we would do that. We're looking at coupling batteries with wind, coupling batteries with PV, all those different options we are looking at. But we have to find the best mix to be able to produce the water at still a reasonable cost. In our budget this year, we've been looking at some package solutions because based on the information that we've been getting from the Meteorological Office and on the CHMI, they're predicting that we should expect to be going through drier periods, and I think last year was the worst on their records. So we are not waiting. We are actually examining all of those options that you had mentioned, and later in the year, you'll probably be seeing some of those rolled out especially along the west coast of the island where the seawater is readily available. But we also have to see how we can look at the energy that it consumes and put solutions in place that will minimize the amount of energy that they're using. What we're actually looking to do, we know that they're energy demanding, and we're actually looking at PV systems at other facilities that would kind of offset the cost of those packaged plants or desalination plants around the island.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Two small questions from me before we wrap up, because we are limited for time now. One, I need some advice. There are a few people in my constituency and others. I need some advice in terms of the water bill, not so much your part of it, but the levies, on what somebody can do that the house is unoccupied. For instance, if you had a relative that died and nobody's in the house other than for you to go once, twice a week to make sure nobody broke in, but still are being asked to pay the levies. Is there any recourse to that? And two, before you move on, the last thing, the residents in Long Bay, I had asked since June last year, don't want you to sound bad, y'all normally give me excellent service. requested that their meters be moved from the main road in Long Bay. They traverse about a plot of land, maybe 50, 70 meters, to get to their homes, several of the residents. So they are prone to fires and the grass piece, and then they have leaky pipes that they're unaware of till they get a high bill, or the animals trod the pipes. Can I speak to you at some point with respect to having the meters move a little closer to their homes? That's it from me.
Madam Chair, we're always very happy to facilitate people in relocating equipment where it's causing them a hardship. So we have no difficulty in looking at that. I know you had raised it before. I can undertake now to follow up and see that that is addressed. If it can be done, let it be done. If it can't be done, we will give you the reason why it can't be done. With respect to the unoccupied properties, there are a couple of things that can be done. You can apply for a suspension of service. If the service is suspended, remember that the GSC attaches to the water bill. So if you actually suspend or disconnect the service, then none of the rates apply at all. Previously, historically, people were, especially when it's an estate matter, they were unwilling to disconnect the property, because if you disconnected the property, you then had the other issue where that until the estate was resolved, you couldn't get the property reconnected because there was no owner to give permission. So historically, we've had a situation where it was more expedient to keep the water connection and not get it turned off, because you couldn't get a service reinstituted easily. But that problem has now disappeared with the new policy of the Barbados Water Authority. So if there's no reason to keep the service active if no one is in the house, or if the house is unoccupied for a significant period of time, because you then deal with other things. You deal with perhaps bursts. You can have a burst or a leak inside the house and you not knowing it compromise something. So that issue now, with the revelation, with what we've discussed today, and we're going to publicize it a bit more so people are more aware, that issue should no longer arise, because there's no need to keep that service connection going, because you can reinstitute or apply for new service if that one was disconnected.
You offered a second explanation, or that's within it. You said one or two things.
Suspension or disconnection, it all amounts to the same thing.
Okay. Go ahead. That's it.
That's it.
I'm inviting you to do your wrap-up now, 10 minutes or less.
Madam Chair, in pursuit of time, I don't think I'm going to use my full 10 minutes. I want to thank all of the honorable members for their questions. We had a significant amount of time in the hot seat, and I would like to think that the bulk of questions that members have been addressed, and I know that some were able to put direct questions from their constituents to the representative of the Water Authority, and I hope that we have operated in some measure, or this process has been such that the questions of the constituents and the citizens of Barbados have been addressed, and people have a greater measure of comfort, or at least a greater measure of understanding following this process. I just want to commend the staff of the ministry, who I think represented themselves quite well, and by ministry, I mean all the departments under our ministry. It has been an exciting and hectic last 12 months, last 18 months. Our program for the next 12 months is equally as exciting and probably going to be even more frenetic as we try to push all of the policies that assist us in achieving our 2030 goals and taking off our checkpoints along the way, as well as enhancing the services and the reputation of the Barbados Water Authority in the delivery of safe, potable, efficient drinking water to the people of Barbados, and in their satisfying and representing their mandate. Madam Chair, I don't think there's much more that I can add, but I ask that Barbados and Barbadians stay tuned. As we say, watch this space, because a lot of exciting things are happening. Significant developments have happened over the last 12 months, and I expect there to be a visual recognition of the aims, efforts, and achievements of our ministry, whether in the energy sector, whether in the oil and gas sector, whether in the water sector, that people will be able to see that things are happening in the Ministry of Energy and Water Resources. So with that, Madam Chair, I beg to move that this head do stand power.
question is that head
36.
head 36 in the amount of 28,556,000. Yes. Yes. I know. In the amount of $28,556,277. Stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. Members may leave the House, Minister. Who doing 90?
May we be excused from?
Yes, you may. Say again? Oh. No problem. I lost the page. This is 7.
Madam Chairman, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Creative Economy, Culture and Sports, Head 90, the sum of $34,479,699.
Thank you. Madam Chair, permission to allow my team to join me.
So granted. Honourable Minister, you may introduce your team and offer your opening remarks. 10 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Let me just go back to come forward, so to speak. Last year, unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity to come into the well for the estimates. And so I want to take a few minutes to just go back and form some sort of context so people begin to understand what it is that we would have accomplished in the last 18 months and what are some of the challenges that we would have faced in that period. When we came into the ministry, one of the first things that we we started to realize is that there were a number of projects and activities that were stalled. And we had to do a dissecting of it, first to find out, you know, why these things would have been stalled. You had projects from early 2000s and different things that were confronting the thing. We also had the opportunity to go out to the various entities that fall underneath the ministry and have one-on-one conversations with staff members and others. And we realized that at that particular point in time, there seemed to be in some quarters a very low morale, a lot of teething problems that people have been dealing with for a long time. And so there was first a restoring of, I guess the only word I would use is confidence in government, that there are things that people were enthusiastic about getting done that were not done. And then we started the process of deconstructing and reconstructing the ministry and the departments that fall underneath it. For this financial year, there are a number of initiatives that we're going to be undertaking, which are going to really be for the benefit of the public at large. When you talk about culture, and I'm going to break them down systematically, oftentimes, I remember last year, I made the comment that culture was not just the arts. It's not just seeing people in terms of dance and food and the other things, but it really was behavior that you want to look at. And if people had a chance to look at the Covenant of Hope, it spoke specifically about us being able to have a national identity, a new national identity. And that is part and parcel of what your culture is, how you view yourself, how the rest of the world views you, how do you behave, how you think. These things cut right across every possible sector of life itself. And so we've taken up a position where we want to use not only our heritage, we want to use the history, and not just the history from a one-sided viewpoint, but that covers all of the persons who make up this wonderful place that we call Barbados, to bring our societies closer together, to get people to know more about themselves, to be the very best that they can be. And whilst doing that, we realize that there's a lot of economic potential within the sectors of heritage, within what we call the creative economy. And if you go to any dictionary, there's so many different definitions of the creative economy. But the way we look at it is how do you get your people to use their creative imagination and monetize that? And what do I mean by that? Let's say, for instance, a very simple thing, like you have a needle worker who, for some reason, had a problem with a sewing machine from somewhere. And one of our young people came up with an idea that could get them to not use the traditional thing, but enhance what it does. You can look at that as part and parcel of the creative economy, of being able now to creatively think and imagine how you can do things in a different way and monetize that. And so from that standpoint, the creative economy part of the ministry is one of the things that I believe, and I think I speak for the entire team, is going to be where the biggest impact of this ministry is going to be felt in years to come. Having said that, I want to now take the opportunity to introduce some of the members of the team, and I'm going to start with, to my left, Mr. J.U. Wiltshire, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of the Creative Economy, Culture and Sport. To my right, Mrs. Carol Robert Reefer, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Cultural Foundation. Mr. Neil Murrell, the Director of the National Sports Council. Mr. Stephen Rowe, who is the Sports Development Officer within the ministry itself. Ms. Maylene Gittings is our Senior Accountant. Ms. Sharon Johnson is the Senior Cultural Policy Officer and Cultural Policy and Research Unit. Ms. Donna Green Rushnigi is the Director of Cultural Policy and the Research Unit. And these are just a few of the persons to let the public know, because oftentimes when you talk about this ministry, people see only sport and the NCF. So they know the National Sports Council and they know the National Cultural Foundation. But the National Archives fall underneath this ministry, as does the National Library Service, and we are also responsible for the museum. And today, we're going to put forward our plans and how we intend to use the monies that have been allotted to us to, like I said before, to better serve the general public of Barbados.
Thank you. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Minister, for your opening comments, for your presence and that of your team. I'm not going to make opening comments. We'll get straight to questions because I have about 14 of them. And we'll start with the easier one and the one which has to do with numbers. And see what we can learn in terms of the numbers captured in the document. There is a provision for professional services in program 276, subprogram 7005. It moves professional services from 32,000 to 200,000 in the year ahead, just asking with reference to that. Also in 276, same subprogram 7005, account 415, provision for $500,000. 276, subprogram 0297, 785, I think that's the account that has to do with capital structures. There's a movement from $500,000 to $900,000. Program 276, subprogram 0298, account line 315, I think that has to do with the NCF. There's a movement in grant from 6.4 to 7.7, increase of over $1 million, which perhaps the minister or his team would want to justify for us. And program 425, subprogram 0432, line 416, that has to do with capital works. There's a movement by $600,000 from $600,000 to $1.2 million. Those are some of the numbers. I hope you got that, you and your team, Minister. I also noticed that with reference to the Sports Council, there's a provision being requested of $13.8 million, but at $12.5 million of that goes towards administrative costs. And I'm wondering if you are satisfied as a minister that that is a sufficient provision of expenditure beyond administrative costs for the work of the National Sports Council. That's my first question, ma'am.
Okay.
I have to do the numbers.
Okay, so that's a lot in one thing. So we try to break them down one by one. Let's start with the National Cultural Foundation. You wanted to, could you just repeat for me because it was a lot?
The movement for NCF, it seems, is from 6.4 to 7.7. Just asking you to justify that. I'm sure that you can.
Of course. Okay, so I allow the CEO to explain.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, sir. Like the Minister, I would want to go back a bit before I come forward. Now, in previous years, and therefore in previous estimates, the funding for the foundation, in particular as it relates to the budget for the annual Crop Over Festival, was presented as a balanced budget, which is good as an academic exercise, but is a bit untrustworthy in terms of being able to project that at the end of this exercise, which is the production of the Crop Over Festival, you would not be in deficit. This year, for the first time in a long time, the budget presented for the Crop Over Festival is an actual budget. It is based on costs coming out of the production of last year's budget, and it also includes provisions for enhancements to certain events due to our participation in the Regathering and Vision 2020 project. And therefore, the majority of that increase in numbers is reflective of the presentation of crop over and NIFCA in part as actual budgets and not balanced budgets.
Does that help? We're going to move on to the... So, thank you. I'll allow the permanent secretary now to deal with the other matter.
Good afternoon. You spoke of item 226, professional services, on the subprogram, on the program 276, culture. And that is the subprogram 7005, general management and coordination services. And you have rightly indicated that the provision for professional services has moved from $32,000 to $200,000. And it has done so, that movement has occurred simply because of the fact that in the next financial year, we are going to be working on revising the national cultural policy that was prepared back in 2011. Obviously, there have been significant movements in the culture and creative economy sphere within that over the last 10 years, and therefore it is evident that we have to now craft a new cultural policy, and we have therefore made provision in the estimate for that particular exercise. We have also engaged a consultant who's going to be working with the ministry as well as with the National Cultural Foundation in terms of assisting in the development of artists, as well as as you are aware, we are currently in the midst of the Regathering exercise, and there are a number of events which have to be put on through the country, and therefore this particular consultant will be assisting the ministry and the National Cultural Foundation in that exercise. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Mr. Neil Murrell, the director of the National Sports Council, to come to explain your other queries, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon to all. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you. Thank you all. The minister spoke briefly in his opening sentences to a new identity as well as a new national consciousness, and this is where the National Sports Council will be moving over the next year, fiscal year. We have had this increase because we want to reach out to our various publics, various communities. We've had an increase in communications. We have the UNCTAD conference coming in October of this year. And we have a number of new projects that we want to bring to the table to service the community. So that speaks to the increase for this financial year. Thank you.
I wasn't too bothered about an increase. I was really querying whether or not the money is sufficient. Beyond other 13 million, 12 million goes to operational costs. Is it sufficient beyond that, the balance, to significantly support the program of the Sports Council?
The truth is, sir, we would always like more money, but we have to work within...
I didn't quite hear that. Could you repeat that?
We would work within the financial constraints that we have, and we recognize that, so we will work with what we have.
I think also what needs to be said also is that even amongst the constraints that we currently find ourselves under, the National Cultural Foundation and the National Sports Council benefit from the funds that are generated by the lotteries. And what we've been doing over the last 18 months is to ensure that we use those funds as wisely and as beneficially as humanly possible to help subsidize the areas where we may find ourselves a bit short.
Remember?
There were two other parts of that question that had to do with numbers. In 2760-2977 there's a movement from 500,000 to 900,000. My note suggests it has something to do with Rock Hall as well as the library. So if you could just update us as to what's happening with reference to the Rock Hall. I imagine that's the Rock Hall Freedom Village.
Thanks. Rock Hall, as you know, is the first free village in Barbados. The development was conceptualized back in 2002. There has not been a lot of progress on Rock Hall over the last 18 years. We are currently in the midst of, we have started that project. We are working assiduously in terms of completing that project by the end of June this year. And the provision in the estimates is essentially to complete the project. As you are aware, the monument was erected a number of years ago. There's provision for 4 shops which were erected back in 2016, and as I indicated, those shops have significantly deteriorated. Essentially, what has happened over the last few years is that the site has significantly deteriorated, and we therefore felt it is prudent and proper to make provision in estimates to complete a project that has been lagging over a period of time. In terms of the library, as you are aware, the library had to be relocated. The general library had to be relocated in view of the fact that there were some significant issues with that accommodation. The roof has deteriorated very badly. Sections of the floor is missing, so we have made provision in the estimates to restart that project. Now, the cost of that work is going to be about $9.5 million. Obviously, there's not enough money in the estimates to complete the project, but we want to be in a position to restart the project by engaging consultants with a view to structuring the project so that it can be completed within the next 2 to 3 years. Now, what we have done is we are going to be looking to get donations from various areas. Some entities have indicated that they are willing to put money in that project, but we have to make an effort to start back the project on the basis of the engagement of professional services. Thank you.
All right, my other 2 questions quickly, ma'am, with your leave. Since Mr. Merle is at the table, let me go sports. Wonder if Mr. Worrell would be willing to advise his board and his minister if the National Sports Council is not now involved in the business of seeking placements for Barbadian sports men and women in the big overseas arena of sports, whether it's football, or basketball, or what have you. If the National Sports Council is not now actively engaged in the business of seeking for placement for Barbadian sports person, would you advise your minister and your board that this is something that the country needs to consider? I have a view that we still continue to make sport about sport in Barbados, when sports is one of the biggest businesses in the world. So would you give that advice to your minister and your board? And the second part of that, which is my last question at this time, would you advise your minister to advise his cabinet colleagues that perhaps it would be good, if we're not now doing this, that we provide for government scholarships for sporting endeavor for a selected few persons on an annual basis? We're giving state-funded scholarships to people to do engineering and what have you, medicine, what have you. What about sports persons? If it's not now happening, should not we elevate sporting activity to the level where the government provides for 4, 5, 6, maybe half a dozen scholarships every year in some sporting endeavor, using, of course, a transparent selection criteria.
All right, so I'll answer your second question first. Barbados has always had a policy, especially as it relates to national associations with regard to scholarships. The number of scholarships given, athletic scholarships, the scholarships given every year, football scholarships, basketball scholarships, and in the main, girls volleyball scholarships. That has been done over the years. The Ministry of Education has also given, over the years, national development scholarships. I agree with you, and if I had to advise further the government, that sports has tremendous reach in Barbados. We all know the great talent of Sir Garfield Sobers and what he has done. So sports is a fairly pliable, easy to orchestrate and easy to bring that sort of recognition to the country. So yes, if I had to advise the government or the minister, I would also help them to recognize that sport should be part and parcel of a normal scholarship, part of the national academic scholarship program. Yes.
Just for clarification, ma'am, are you saying that at this moment we could say that there are sports persons who have had what we call a Barbados scholarship in some sporting endeavor? Or are you saying that there have been some people who have been sponsored to some extent with funding to enable them to benefit from a program overseas? There's a big difference.
Yeah, there've been many scholarships have been given over the years in various sports, in athletics and other sporting endeavors over the years. If you want to boil it down to an academic sporting scholarship, that is a slight difference that we're not looking at. We give general academic scholarships over the years, but I think you're suggesting that we should have sporting scholarships.
Yes.
But at the same time, you would have to tie that basically to an academic scholarship as well.
Well, we can agree or disagree on that particular aspect of it. But what I'm saying is we have to, in my view, elevate sporting disciplines to a level where a young man or young woman can feel, I can qualify for a Barbados scholarship in this field of my sporting endeavor. I believe we have to go there. I don't know that we're there, and I'm not too sure, understanding you clearly that we are there. But I personally very strongly believe sporting is such an opportunity for people to advance themselves that they themselves can benefit, and then indirectly through them, country can benefit. And we've got, in my view, to go there. I don't think that we have quite embraced that concept. I might be wrong. And additionally, would you advise your minister and board that your agency should be actively involved in placements for persons? This is outside of the scholarship.
Yes, the Sports Council can be one of the clearinghouses in that respect, yes.
I'd like to thank you for the questions and suggestions. But I'd also like to say that right now we are in the process of restructuring the sports policy, and some of what you've mentioned are going to be parts and parcels of what goes into the draft.
Would you like to employ me as a consultant?
Well, I think we've started all of that already, but it's good that you're able to think along the same lines as we do.
I am hearing behind my head, if I come over, the government will.
Yes.
Honorable member for St. James Central.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to ask a question of the Minister and Mr. Murrell in particular, which is a little bit of a continuation from where the Honorable Leader of the Opposition left off. I think the Honorable Leader of the Opposition may have dipped his toe in the water but not gone far enough. For me, it is a philosophical thing that sports should become a major revenue-generating aspect of the Barbados economy. And therefore, I think we would have to be seeking to establish sports as a real professional career option for Barbadian young people and to have that instilled in them. But the question really is this. To do that, do you not agree that you would have to have the supporting infrastructure that allows for us to be able to draw out the best of our young people? And specifically now with reference to the National Stadium, could you elaborate, please, on the status of the stadium today and plans for it for the future within the context of it becoming a location or premier location for regional and international competition?
Thank you very much, Minister. Okay, so let me just say that we have started the process because you mentioned about the development of sports in terms of infrastructure. As we speak now, there has been an ongoing process of the redevelopment of some of our fields and pavilions across the country. For instance, I will let Mr. Murrell go into a little bit more detail, but at some of the primary schools in some neighborhoods, we have done extensive work in providing basketball courts and resurfacing of them in order to get our young people from a very early age involved in those sports, volleyball, road tennis, that we could begin to nurture that talent. In terms of the National Stadium, when we came to office, we were at a point where the negotiations for the National Stadium, we thought were down to just one bit of paper to be signed, and we would have been on our way. Unfortunately, a number of things would have happened in between that time. There would have been a change of ambassador from China to Barbados and a whole set of other things. So we had to go through the process all over again. But to answer the question where we're at now is that all we're waiting on at this juncture is to get look at designs that are going to come from the Chinese side for us, remembering full well that this is grant funding, it's not a loan, and so therefore they're working with us to help us to get this brand new stadium up. So all we're waiting for right now, Minister, is designs to come in that we can agree upon. And as soon as we do that, then the building process, we're a little closer to getting the building process done. We've had extensive meetings with teams from China over the last probably 6 or 7 months, where they've been in Barbados, they've done site visits, they've advised that some of the areas that we were looking at, where we can do things, how much we can do and cannot do. So we've gone through all of that process, and we're just waiting now, like I said, for the designs to come in. And once we agree on those, and then it will be on to the next stage, which would be actual building of it. But while we do that, we do recognize that on the ground in the communities is where you also need to do some work on the infrastructure, because if you want to encourage people, and our slogan is sports for all, if you want to encourage the young, the old, the persons with disabilities, you must upgrade the facilities that exist. And a lot of these facilities would have been built probably in the 70s. And so they no longer really serve the communities that have grown over time as they should. So we've undertaken that as I said, as we speak, a number of them are being refurbished. I could speak to Dover, which has been very popular in terms of cricket. Bayville School has been done. Lumber Company has also been done. We've put in lights. We fixed the pavilion itself. We've also put in an irrigation system for grass. So we're really using these facilities now in pilot projects to see what we can do across the country. And as you quite rightly spoke, Minister, about sports tourism, this is part and parcel of our effort to upgrade the facilities so that we can attract teams who may want to come to Barbados and use the facilities for practice, or for our own entrepreneurs to put on competitions and invite people to be a part of it. So we've started that process, but I'll let Mr. Morris speak a little bit more on this.
Thank you, Minister. And I really want to speak a little more closely on the National Stadium project. What the Board of Management of the Council has done, we recognize that the stadium cannot be overused by clubs and associations, so we've met with them. We have now been in the process of regrading 6 school fields. We've just completed one at St. George Secondary. We are doing 5 others. 5 others are in the works: Christchurch Foundation, Dighton Griffith, the Allen School, Corrigan Parry, and Leicester Vaughan. So we are attacking these fields across the north, south, and east and west and central of Barbados. And what regrading does, regrading of the field does, it gives the young people at the schools an opportunity to play on new and plush fields, but it also gives the clubs and the public the opportunity to also recreate at these and have their sports at these various grounds. What the council has recognized as well is that when the National Stadium is redeveloped, when a new stadium comes on stream, there's going to be in a period where the stadium would be out of commission. And we are actively looking at the ground at Warren's, St. Michael, to have a sort of a ground where we can also do athletic endeavor there. We're going to put in a sort of a grass or a modular track, as well as have that field as a field for throws, a throws facility. So we're going to have long jump there, we're going to have discus there, triple jump, and so on. So the board and management of the council are being proactive in looking at new grounds, new activities. We're actually also going to be working with sponsors. We think that working with sponsors is essential in terms of sponsoring our various activities, and also working with sponsors to help maintain the various facilities we have across the land from Barbados. So we want to have a closer relationship, and we really want to co-create value with sponsors over the next financial year. Thank you.
Ma'am, if I may again, Mr. Morley, I thank you for your observation and the elaboration on the infrastructure issue. I think it is valuable because of the fact that in my constituency of St. James Central, at this time of the year when we're going into the football season, it is a difficult thing in the month of March and in the month of April to find a game, let's say at Bagatelle, where you don't get an injury of some sort because the quality of the field is not really what it should be. And that is not unique to Bagatelle. That is a reality in many parts of Barbados. So that you are paying attention to the infrastructure is important. What I think was missing from what I heard was the issue of attention to lighting. Now, in my constituency, lighting is an issue. Bagatelle is really the exception. We have an excellent field at Hoyts Village, which is arguably one of the largest and most sought after for purposes of cricket in the north of the island. But the reality is it is in darkness every evening. Much smaller down at the bottom on the coast, but where there are no other fields is in Fitz Village. And at Good Shepherd School, again, no lighting. These have been challenges which existed from time immemorial. And the question that I have for you is are we going to be soon able to go back to a policy of lighting playing fields? Because we cannot, on one hand, talk about generating the interest in our young people in sports to the extent of it being seen as a major revenue generating aspect of the Barbados economy. My words, not necessarily yours, but I think philosophically the minister is at the same place. Establishing sports as a professional career option for Barbadian young people, and the infrastructure not be there, especially lighting, which allows them to be productively using their time and their talent and their energies after hours and late into the night. I think that is important, and I would like to hear what plans the Sports Council has for that.
Minister, thank you. We've already started the process of looking for solutions, because one of the things that we encountered when we came to office was humongous bills for lights around the country. And the problem was that people in the communities, and this is where I have to talk about the ethics of people, would jig the infrastructure so that lights would be on morning, noon, and night. And we were saddled with unsustainable bills. And so we had to begin the process of systematically, one by one, trying to find ways to reduce that bill and to bring some semblance of order to how these lights were being used. But I think the person who could best explain this to you would be the chairman of the National Sports Council, because he was the one who had to be in the forefront, and I'm sure some of you would have seen in the newspapers him talking about some of the problems that we would have encountered. So I would invite Mr. McDonald Fingal to give us a better outlook on what we were faced when we came to office.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Thanks, Mr. Simmons, for the question. Yes, we had a problem when we first came in with a light bill about $500,000. Actually, more than that, $540,000 for the year. And in terms of the tokens now, to match it back, no match at all, just a few $1,000s. So the minister used a word like jigged, but it is thieving. You understand? They found ways. We found 94 tokens belong to Transport Board.
Madam Alderman, I didn't quite hear what Mr. Fingal said. If you would repeat for me, please.
I said 94 tokens were found belong to Transport Board. You never heard the word thieving before, sir?
Did you say thieving, sir?
Thieving, sir. Thieving. Is it not allowed in this chamber, sir?
Ma'am, I am sure, I'm sure thieving is allowed in the chamber. I just wanted to be clear, understood that at the Sports Council, it is his view that there was thieving, with one respect, to the extent of over $500,000.
No, it tantamounts to that. What I'm saying is that when you go and rig the system, sometimes to set it up, they have people in Barbados who have electrical knowledge outside the people that are supposed to be working in that area. So they know how to rig it, set it up, and then sometimes they can't get turned off, so it shows night and day. But we don't see it in the daytime because we're competing with the light. But then all of a sudden the bills reflect it. And when to know, for instance, what hurt was that the Barbados Light and Power Company had suggested that we charge $35 for each token based on the type of energy that goes out. But we only charge 10 because that's like giving away, but we just wanted people to come and use the facilities. And here it is that you're allowing them to use it for just $10, and now they're going to want to use it for free. So that we could not, it couldn't sustain it. Because we got to be paying out money and nothing coming in. And then there's other things involved with repairing the lights. Like for instance, right now, the council does not have a position called a maintenance technician. We don't have that. We need that. Because last year we paid $316,000 in maintenance alone, just in people going and fixing lights and doing plumbing and stuff like that. And if we had someone on staff, we wouldn't have a problem because they'd be working for us and they'd be doing the same work. And it would, of course, the cost wouldn't be like that. It was just about $50,000 or so. So this is what we need. So it's not only about the money. Yes, there's money involved, but if we can save money, it would also help. And that's what we're trying to do. So now what happened is that we had to find a system that was fair, a system that everybody would be pleased with. And what we did, we shut down the whole thing one time and invited everybody in. And they came. Over 100 people came. And we explained our position, and they understood. So we put a policy in place where we wanted someone from the community to be in charge of a key for that particular venue. So they came in, they signed, and they had to, it was written in such a way that they knew they were responsible and had to get a count. If you were to find one foreign token in that box. So we had now a bag for each facility. So if the bag costs CA, when we go there, we put the tokens in there, we find a foreign token, then you got to explain it because you only got a key. And that, they accepted, and that's how it was working. Of course, now some people find some ways to just rig it again. But every time we hear that it's rigged, or we know it's rigged, we're going to shut it down again and set up. Now, for instance, there's a particular place we have to now change the person because we couldn't trust him anymore. He said he was going to do the job, and now we got to change it. So that's where the real thing came from with the lights. But we know that lights are necessary. We want everybody to have lights, but it is very costly, and the money has to be coming from somewhere. Even every time there's a bulb that has to be fixed, we have to hire. We don't have a cherry picker owned by the council. I think the government has one, but they only go to 40 feet. Ours go out to 50 feet. And therefore, they can't fix unless we hire someone. And that's $600 or so an hour just to come out and do it every time. And it's all over the island. I mean, every parish has this problem. So we had to try and counter it, and we are doing a good job as far as concerned. All of a sudden, there's some balance going on. But just it's not perfect. I figure if I got 85% of it going, that in terms of standard deviation, I would accept that. So we have it around that time, 85% now that's working well. And I'm satisfied that we are getting things normalized. And yes, people are going to complain. Some constituency are going to suffer sometimes, but we're going to correct it as it goes along. And when the people start to cheat again, we'll fix them too.
My last question would be a follow-up on the same point that is being made by the chairman. When the party to which I belong was campaigning for the government that we have won, we were telling the people, in keeping with the philosophy articulated by the then leader of the opposition, now Prime Minister, that there were a few things that we had to look at: the public interest that we had to protect, the public mischief we had to correct, and the question of whether there is any technological solution that could be deployed to solve some of those mischiefs when we identified them. So the question for you, Mr. Chairman, is this: is there any technological solution that can be deployed in terms of lighting? Because I take your point. Clearly there was thieving, but we want to make sure that in an effort to stamp it out, that you use whatever technology is available to make sure that existing light playing fields that have lights are able to do so in a cost-effective way, while allowing the Sports Council not to struggle to find money to pay an unnecessary bill, but to deploy such money as it does have in allowing places like Fitz Village in St. James or Hoyts Village in St. James to get little light too. And that is the question, sir, for you.
And not only in St. James, every other parish will benefit when we get through, sir. What we do have is that there's the technology allows us now to have like top up. Whereas before you had to go and buy a token, because now to fix these boxes, the box is outdated now, by the way. So we do top ups now, but we want to do an experiment first. And I think the first place that we want to do is experiment. Unfortunately, sir, it's not Hoyts Village. It was Briar Hall, where we would want to do it like a pilot project to make sure it's working correctly before we send it out, because we want to make a mistake, make it with one rather than with all. So this top up business, you will go in and just like you top up on your phone, you top up and you will get. It works better because if you lose only half hour, But when you finish, that half hour remains we do next time. With this system we have here, if you put in for an hour and you leave a half hour, it's still going to run out the hour. So it is more efficient and it's more beneficial to the purchaser as also and to us too. So Heights Village and all the other villages will be in time presented with this particular form of technology.
If I may also add to that, Minister, we've started discussions with some local entrepreneurs in being able to help us to find renewable energy solutions also that would help with this particular process. The BNOC has already started to look at a pilot project for us. So these are the things that we're actively pursuing as we speak, in being able to reduce the energy costs, be able to give the public the opportunity to use the facilities at a much higher level of usage. And also, again, if you want to look at it for the sheer vision of 2030 of us becoming fossil fuel free, this is where we begin to play our part at this point in time.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Michael East.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, let me thank the Minister, in whom I have great confidence, not only in him but his team as well, to achieve the objectives that he has set about to achieve. Now, for considerable time, and I'm starting this way because I heard the Minister place the emphasis on a national consciousness. I too am fairly obsessed with the achievement of a national consciousness. Obviously, trying to, hopefully, we'll be able to establish a universal definition of what constitutes that consciousness. But what I know for sure is that we've had major cultural imbalances in this country as a result of the evolution of its history itself. And we have a number of persons in culture that promote things like George Washington House. Mm-hmm. And they want to save every plantation house so they have the memories of the plantocracy. Nobody even speaks about the house where King Jaja lived. It is in my constituency in St. Michael's East. What you know about Jaja is that King Jaja looked at a woman's buttocks, and he wouldn't let Beck alone. And they have imparted that kind of miseducation and pollution in the heads of our people. Now, if we are going to go in the direction of producing a national consciousness, it means that we have to let our people know that they have contributed something meaningful to the development of our nation. King Jaja, I don't want to give a history lesson, but King Jaja is a real king, the mock king like King Del. King Jaja of Opobo. And the work that he has done, the resistance that he has put up in trying to protect the sovereignty of Opobo, is people ought to know. Is a man protecting the palm oil industry in Africa and was lured on board a ship like Henri Christophe, it was Christophe, for the discussions and brought to the Caribbean. And you should ask yourself the fundamental question: why would they bring a commoner, if he was, and put him in that house opposite? Even the Europeans had more respect for him than the black people that exist today. And if we are going to look at redressing the imbalances in our cultural influences, I believe that house, we should focus our attention on that house in Tumai Hill, where King Jaja lives. Try to find out who is the owner. From what I've heard, Mr. Wilkinson from St. Philip, and we should try to see if we can use that unit as an extension of the Ross University, and probably that building can be used for research purposes or something. I would like to hear what the minister's position is on that. I would like to talk about another building after you answer.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister. Like you, I am very conscious of the things that we promote as heritage and of significance to us as Barbadians. And yes, we would have, and I think you yourself would know that we've started not only the conversation, but we've started to do some work in terms of two particular places. I mentioned earlier the Rock Hall Freedom Village and also the Newton Slave Burial Site, a place where if you ask many Barbadians if they know where it is, they don't. And if you talk about the story of it itself, there's not a lot that people do. And we are in the process of being able now to go in and do some work in these two particular areas, and again, to get that part of our history more recognizable to our people. But to talk a little bit about the slave burial site and what we're doing, I would want Ms. Sharon Johnson from the Cultural Policy and Research Unit to come to the well, because she would have been one of the persons in the forefront of that particular project for a while now. And I'll let her speak to you on that particular one, Minister.
Thank you, Minister. Good afternoon. As the Minister would have indicated, our ministry's intention and strong focus in 2020 is to inculcate a strong sense of national pride and to promote the protection and the preservation of our cultural heritage. One of the major projects that we're focusing on is building a National Register of Historic Places. And as the Minister would have alluded to, King Jaja would be one of those places. This National Register will be an online inventory of sites within communities that have cultural, economic, historical, religious, and significance to communities. What is even more special about it, that it moves away from the top-down approach of government saying, this is important to us. Rather, we go into communities identify places that are of significance to them, and we go out then as a team. There's a technical review committee that comprises a number of government agencies. We collect that data. Apart from doing the research on it, there's a space on that inventory for video, for film, for oral histories. In fact, we connect with the elders in the community who can tell us something, because we recognize that within communities, this is where you find that rich heritage. Much of that has not been documented anywhere. So this gives us a chance to boost our research capacity within the ministry and also educate Barbadians about their heritage. As I said, King Jaja House is one of those houses that we are currently working on. Newton Burial Ground is another one. Our focus, we recognize that people will come to Barbados and there's no real significant site that speaks to our African heritage and to slavery. Newton Burial Ground will be one. It has been abandoned for some time, but we are working with our partners, the Ministry of Environment, as well as the museum, to make that site an interpretive site and to encourage Barbadians to understand the importance of that site being the only discovered slave burial ground in this hemisphere. So that is something that can be promoted, used for tourism processes, and also for educating Barbadians about their heritage.
Thank you. I also want to take this, Minister, even a bit further. When we begin to talk about the Barbadian heritage, we must not find ourselves in a position where we think that heritage and a lot of the stories that are to be told are relegated only to those of us who may be the descendants of slaves or those who may have been the slave masters. This country also has a rich history of persons of what you will call East Indian descent in this country. And they are part of this community, and their stories also need to be told and also put into literature, put into our history books and whatever. But then there's also another set of persons in this country who oftentimes you will hear people say they came as indentured servants. Now, I don't know what is the difference really between an indentured servant and a slave. You know, one would say that one was being paid a little money, but when it all boils down, it is still slavery, and it's still about the economics of the day. And in the parish of St. John, you have a number of persons whose stories need to be told. We've had engagement with persons from Ireland and Scotland who are very interested in erecting a monument in St. John to those persons who would have traveled under that indentured servant program, if you choose to call it that. And I think that in order, as we talk about building out this national identity, that these are some of the things that as Barbadians we're going to have to confront and begin to educate ourselves about the many different persons, personalities, and trials and tribulations that people would have suffered in developing the society within which we live today. And so we've started with this national register. Ms. Johnson spoke about the communities themselves being able to be the ones who recognize and say, look, this is of importance to us. And it goes into the register and it's a digital platform for the entire world to be able to see it. I have just come back home again from a trip to Ghana, and we had the opportunity there to expound and expand on the story of the slave trade, not only from Ghana, but to also get people to understand that those persons did not just fade away into oblivion, but that the descendants of these people are the ones who are basically still alive, still holding on to some of the traditions that would have been lost over the years. And so there's that connection that we've started from this ministry in terms of engaging with Ghana and getting back to our roots, to tell that story, because there are persons on this island who can trace their roots right back to Britain and to wherever. But for those of us of African descent, that has been a source of a problem. And so the National Archives has taken up the mantle in terms of us being able now to trace not only just genealogy on island, but they're getting ready to roll out a program where you would have DNA testing kits on island for persons to be able to trace this. And we noticed that around the world, there is a huge interest in this particular thing at this point in time, where people need to know exactly, where they are from and be able to trace their roots. So we're to speak to the minister's questions about how we're trying to find that balance. But the balance can't be only in terms of those of us of African descent, but we have to look at all of the persons who make up this country, Barbados.
Minister, I agree with you, but I am only representing the excessive, where there one specific type in this society that played a meaningful role, constituting over 90% of the population, and very little is mentioned of them. But I believe that all people, they have a right to represent their own interests. So I am only going to be placing the interest today not on the indentured servants, not on Oceanic arrivals. I'm not on 1615 who fight off Cromwell in Oistins. I am not in that or Holtown settlement. I don't talk about those things. My concern is the Rock Hall site, for example. The Rock Hall site is meaningful if you link the Rock Hall site to Samuel Jackman Prescott home in Black Rock. Now, whoever did it last year or year before committed sacrilege in Black Rock. They demolished the house of Prescott without even a public outcry on why this should happen. The first black man to enter the House Assembly. You would tend to believe that a conscious people would be extremely proud and would have reasons to reserve and to protect that heritage more so than a plantation house. But a black house assembly, black people, 97% of the population, ignore that as insignificant and probably would even ridicule me for expressing my views the way that I do, right? But Prescott could not be in Parliament had not for the rights of the people at Rock Hall, who as a consequence of the ownership of property was given the right to vote. And across the entire island, that free village has a relationship with what transpired down there. We allow, because of, no, he's not related to me. And I would not even speak on it. I believe that we can't, unless you're going to reconstruct the building, I am not going to suggest that because I know that'd be a hard road to travel. But my view is that at least some monument could be placed on the site with a few lines inscripted there, so that people will know that that was the home of a great black man. And in addition to that, I believe that we need to go into a re-education program. There's too much ignorance existing in the society of the importance of persons like Prescott, the importance of King Jaja, the importance of the main slave burial ground in the Caribbean. I believe it is one of the biggest slave burial ground in the Caribbean. I visited that with you, Minister, and your team, and I believe that we need to move as swiftly as possible. I also feel that the Ministry of Culture need to have more power in its hands through some statutory instrument, that when the other departments of government give the freedom even to people who own valuable units or property that is related to our heritage, when they apply to town planning, whatever the other agencies are, to demolish these buildings, they should never be allowed to do so. Having a ministry, a culture that is powerless, only black rule, and that culture cannot step in and say, no, not that. You can't demolish that. We are preserving that as part of our heritage in order to inspire our people and to let our people know that we are not just here as people who were enslaved and accept that we are slaves, but many of them still believe that they are. And I don't think that we should, if we're going to go in a new direction, this is an excellent opportunity. Minister, with your background, this is an excellent opportunity for you to etch your name in the history of Barbados as well as the only progressive Minister of Culture. I hope that you do not allow that opportunity to escape you.
Well, thank you very much, Minister. I think a bit of what you've said, we've started that. I would have mentioned the National Register, where things can be placed on it. It's digital, so that even if we lose the building, but we have pictures of it, you would still be able to see them on this National Register. And that is a place where you keep these things in a digital space. But there's also the ongoing process of the revision and of the Act for the Preservation and Conservation of Antiquities. So I'll let Ms. Johnson just talk a little bit about what we've been doing and where we are at with that particular project.
In August last year, I was able to attend a workshop hosted by the Organization of American States as part of their Caribbean-wide project to establish a heritage economy in the Caribbean. One of the priorities of that project is also to review the legislation pertaining to heritage protection and preservation. Coming out of that, we started discussions with the Solicitor General's office. We need to review the legislation relevant to the protection of heritage. There are a number of pieces of legislation that overlap or are outdated. There are no new trends, international trends in terms of preservation of artifacts and assets, even for the transfer and removal of burial remains. One of our focuses here would be to review those various pieces of legislation and also bring to Parliament as soon as possible the Relics and Antiquities Bill. The Relics and Antiquities Bill would have been drafted some time ago, and there are some areas in it that we need to flesh out, but that allows us to have the kind of strength and instrument that the Honourable Minister was speaking about. So that is something that will be our focus in the next financial year.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, let me begin by recognizing the Minister in a very special way. In a few words, we can if we think we can. And indeed, I know he can because he thinks he can. And I want to compliment the Minister and his team for the sterling work they're doing in terms of sports and in culture. I just listened attentively to the Minister, the member for St. Michael's, and I listened attentively to the chairman of the National Sports Council. But I want to go in a little different direction to the member for St. Michael's. We have sporting activities and sports generally in this country. I came through school, that great institution, as a sportsman, as a cricketer, thanks to the chairman who saw certain skills in me, chairman at the Sports Council, and elevated me back in those days. So I was at the helm of a very important cricket team. And I came through Barbados over the past how many years? Not 38, member for St. Thomas, not 38. And I saw cricketers being given the opportunity to become sportsmen and to ply a trade and become businessmen, either in England, in the US, South Africa. They become global sportsmen in Barbados. And that's because of the investment in cricket from an early age, whether it's through the BCA, whether it's through schools, sporting organizations. But I must say that it was not done for football. And I'm not a footballer. And I share some of the sentiments the member for St. Michael has shared, because I believe the time has come. And I'm not sure who I'm going to direct the question to, either to the director of Sports Council or the chairman or the minister. But the time has come whereby we ought to see ourselves having a professional football league in this country, or semi-professional league. And I want to know from one of the members of the panel, since you're the head minister, I would direct the question to you. What are we doing to develop football as a business for the young men in this country? Because when you look at deviant behavior in this country, let's not turn a blind eye to it. Most of our challenges occur in that area. And I'm not trying to stereotype people, but you would hardly see a shooting at a cricket game. But you may find one or two and a fight at a football game. But I find when we invest and we spend time with these footballers, and I happen to be leader of a club, and that club has done extremely well in the last tournament, the losing finalist Capelli tournament, that these young men who we see as outcasts, when we spend time with them and provide the necessary infrastructure for them to develop, we see a different kettle of fish among these young men. And the minister went with me some time back in my community as the minister of sports. And he can attest to the fact that when these young men were given the attention and the motivation and the incentives, they perform. So I want to know what is being done at a national level, and it has to be driven by some policy initiative for the footballers in this country who are very talented. There's no difference between those in South America and who we have here. We need to invest in these footballers because some are very talented and indeed they need the opportunity. So what is being done at a policy level, Minister, to develop some professional footballers in this country?
Thank you very much, Minister, for your question. Now, I'm going to call Mr. Murray back to the well to help deal with this. Suffice to say this, as I try to expand on this for you. We have been in negotiations now for just about, we started them last year with the Maria Holders Trust to look at a project that was sitting in the ministry, at the National Sports Council for a number of years in terms of the provision of 5 football fields. And I want to stress this again. The 5 fields that are dedicated to the sport of football, because we realized from very early that a huge number of our young men and girls are very much in tune with this particular game. The fact of the matter is that this is probably one of the least expensive games to play, because we have played this game, and certainly myself, from a child and come up, those of us who could not afford to buy football boots, we play barefoot. So it was and still is one of the more popular sports. But we've started the conversations in terms of looking for these 5 football fields which will be dedicated towards that sport. And that is also the first step in the effort to then move on to, as the minister talked about, maybe a semi-professional league. But these things have to be driven by the private sector in terms of the investment and the other things to make them happen. I think government has a role to create the atmosphere for these things to happen. This would be part and parcel of the creative economy, if I may say so myself. But I'll let Mr. Murrell speak a little bit more about that particular project, and then I will fill in any gaps if need be.
Thank you, Minister. If you do an analysis of football in Barbados, from primary to what we say tertiary level, we know that we would have had the BICO football tournament, which we see the emergence of young talent. We have the various under-13 teams. And of late and recently, we have had the under-17 tournament, first of all, community tournament. And then the under-19 tournament this year won by St. Michael Northeast. We also have a number of private, or what we call private enterprises that it is football training for a number of our young people, which leads to scholarships across the length and breadth of Barbados. So the strategy at present in terms of a semi-professional or professional league, at present, in terms of the National Sports Council, it is an ongoing and developing strategy. The minister is correct when he indicated that we have to work hand in glove with the private sector. We think that also a conversation with the clubs and associations will also go very far. And this year, in particular, we have on our books a career showcase, which will also point individuals towards scholarships and towards that semi-professional and professional strategy. It's going to call for money, it's going to call for the private sector, but at present, it is part of one of our strategies in terms of helping our young people to grow and develop. Thank you.
If I may add to that, only I think it would have been the beginning, about the middle of January, I was contacted by Mr. Emerson Boyce, who is well-known Barbadian playing football in England in First Division with Wigan, about bringing a program to Barbados to, again, help to prepare our young people for professional football. And so those discussions have started, and it's just a matter of us looking at the calendar to see where his group are able to come into Barbados and begin these clinics. But on the private end, though, there are a number of football clubs in Barbados who are doing an excellent job in terms of what they're doing with the young people. The one area that I think we need to build out a bit more is the area of young women in the game of football. When you look across the Caribbean, you can see Jamaica and other places at the top levels. And I think this is the area where we need now to put some more focus and concentrate on building that out, just as we are building out for the young men. But Minister, I can assure you that by the end of this year, you will see a number of programs and initiatives being rolled out, which are all done for the sole purpose of getting our young people to a standard where scouts and other persons can actually come in and see the skill levels and be the ones who then take them to the places where we can. The reality of it is Barbados is 166 square miles with a very small population. If you're talking about building a sustainable entity for any sport at all, I mean, our number one sport is cricket. And if you look over the years, you've not been able to even establish a professional cricket league in Barbados. And it really is a numbers game. And then you have to, again, when I talk about that national consciousness, you have to begin to start to prep people into the idea that you actually do pay for sports and that you can pay for local sporting things. What you'll see, lots of people will go to Kensington for international matches, especially if it's England versus the West Indies or whatever. But you ask yourself and be truthful, how many people will want to pay at this particular juncture of our development for our First Division games? You know, so these are things that we have to, once we build out the infrastructure and we build up the skill level of the athletes themselves, we've got to be able then to use whatever resources we have to re-educate and get people to the point where they're comfortable and appreciate the value of sport that they're willing to pay so that we can have even a semi-professional league.
Minister, my follow-up. I noticed the question was answered by both gentlemen, but there was no reference at all to the Barbados Football Association. And what I may say may be controversial, but I will go there. Because over the years, Mr. Minister, and this is not about you, Mr. Minister, because I know where your heart is, and I know what you're doing since you came to office. But over the years, we've had a Barbados Football Association whose interests seem to be internally driven as opposed to focusing on the footballers in the country. And the time has come, and the message has to be sent by the ministry that it's time that the BFA seeks to build out football and make football a living for these young men in this country, as opposed to focusing on the members themselves. And I send the message to the BFA, and I will challenge the ministry to work closely with the BFA to ensure that the sport of football becomes a business for these young men, who some of them are not engineers, and I heard the name called, nor lawyers, nor attorneys, but they have a skill set that I don't have, nor none of us in this room have. And we ought to invest in them. And I think there are persons out there who are willing to invest in developing football in this country to another level and stop kicking ball at night at the AstroTurf and seeing that putting a $10,000 in the tournament, and at the end of the day, that is how they're seeking to build football. A lot more has to be done off the field work, dealing with the mindsets of the young men, workshops, training drills. And I would ask them to model off of the BCA. I'm not saying that the BCA is the best thing in the world, but they have a pretty good structure. Partner with the university or some other institution regionally. Let's utilize the CSME to develop our footballers. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. I can assure you that, again, the preliminary conversations with the BFA and the ministry, also with FIFA on the ground here in Barbados, has started. And there are a number of things that we're looking to cooperate on. But there's also a MOU which is in draft between ourselves, the BOA, and the University of the West Indies, which will again feed into all of these programs. Because if you look at what's happening at the university, they have their sports science program, where a number of young people are coming out of it well equipped to help people in terms of nutrition, in terms of biomechanics, in terms of management for clubs and that sort of stuff. And we're getting ready to utilize all of those skills as soon as we get to sign it off on the MOU. It's with legal people who are taking a look at it now before we can go ahead, before it comes to cabinet or whatever else. But I can assure you that those, not only just the conversations, but some actions have already been taken. If you look at what would have happened last year with a number of our young people going down to Argentina for training with Boca Juniors, that was a collaboration between the BFA, the ministry, and the Argentine ambassador. And so those are the kinds of working together that we're going to be pursuing in the future. So it has started, Minister, and I can assure you that we will expand upon them, as I said before, not only in terms of our young men, but I have to see it through in terms of our young women also for the sport of football.
Thank you. Honourable Member for the City.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I grew up as a youngster in the city of Bridgetown at a time when, even though communities in the city were challenged economically, there was a very high level of social cohesion within those said communities. And I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that the major vehicles for achieving this high level of social cohesion was organized cultural and sporting activities at the community level. I think I can also say, certainly from my perspective, that when you look at the decline of social and cultural activities within communities, that you also start to see the social disintegration of those very communities. It was the cultural and sporting activities that created that high level of self-esteem that young people in particular had at the time. In fact, all people within those communities. It was these cultural and social activities that caused people to be able to have a sense of identity with and belonging to communities. It was those activities, in my view, that created leadership opportunities for people who would not normally have had an opportunity to lead anything. And I believe strongly that although we will not get back the old-time days, and all generations and societies recognize this, but I believe those very vehicles ought to be utilized today in order to help us to shape the communities that we had and to rebuild the social cohesion that once existed. And I, as a youngster, it was a great joy for me to travel to Belplain, which was an outing in those days, to play cricket against the youngsters in Belplain, and we won, of course. So you had bragging rights. But I really strongly believe that apart from the economic benefits of sports and culture, that we have underestimated the importance of these activities to the development of people and communities in this country. And if you want to build or strengthen a national identity, then we have to pay some attention to the social cohesion of every community across the parishes of Barbados. So my question is to the minister and his team: what program does the ministry have for revitalizing culture within the communities and revitalizing sports at instructional level, and also, I would say, at the community, the all-embracing community level in this country? And I use, for example, folk singing and folk groups, which have kind of disappeared from the landscape of this country. So my question is, what programs do you have in mind, if any, to deal with this particular situation? I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. You have hit the nail, as they would say, directly on the head. I don't think that it is that Barbadians would have underestimated the value of sport and culture in terms of the development of the society. What I think what has happened is that the last administration did not see this as being very important, and so therefore a lot of the programs that would have been put in place prior were stopped, and nothing replaced them. And so you create a vacuum within the communities. And if there's the old saying, the devil will find work for idle hands to do. And if you don't have these same programs that you're talking about executed, then people are going to find things to do. And it is a matter of us now being able to reestablish those things. And I would allow Mr. Murrell, as he is here, to speak a little bit about the sporting programs that have started and those that are going to continue as we speak. He will tell you about the various disciplines that we've done training in so far and what is coming. And then I will call Ms. Carol Roberts back to the well to talk about the cultural programs which are going to be executed, and I believe they start next week. Exactly. So, Mr. Murrell, I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Minister Bostick. The National Sports Council has recognized that sport, social, and education programs are critical to the development of young people, and also critical to ensuring that there is activity for young people to do to keep them out of deviancy, so to speak. In collaboration last year with the Ministry of Youth and Community Empowerment, we started a 10-week program in 9 disciplines: athletics, road tennis, basketball, volleyball, cricket, and swimming, which was relatively successful across the communities, which was relatively successful. Swimming was a new sport, which we worked in conjunction with the National Conservation Commission, the Coast Guard, and the Barbados Defense Force to have a swimming program across the community. And it is also one of the reasons why we wanted so badly to fix the facilities at Wesley Hall School, which is in the city, because and in Eagle Hall School, just outside the city, because we felt that not only were we helping those various school facilities, but we would also have facilities which would be able to have development programs to help persons in the surrounding communities. That 10-week community program is being evaluated right now, and we are going to start a new program come August, once we've worked on the weaknesses and strengths of the various programs, to ensure that we have a year-long program which would engage our nation's youth. So the National Sports Council also the board of the National Sports Council, we have a strategic workshop, strategic retreat later on in the month of March, at which we will also work on strengthening the community program that we have coming up. So that is the program at this juncture.
If I may also add, the ministry, along with the National Sports Council and the Barbados Defense Force, have been in initial conversations about expanding the actual BDF sports program and giving it a bit more scale. And so those conversations have started. We're starting to really do an evaluation of the program as it stands, and we're getting ready to do some budgeting. But I agree with you, Minister, that we need to get out into the communities and get young people in some more structured sorts of programs, and that's what we're going to be doing. Again, like I said, we're building out on the Defense Force Sports Program, but we're also, again, teaming up with the Ministry of Youth to continue the training that has started, that Mr. Murray would have spoken about, and in just about a week's time, the Ministry of Youth is going to be rolling out their sporting programs, which again are going to be part and parcel of the cooperation between the two ministries. Again, and you're going to find people getting involved in things like jockey training, which is unusual, but we've noticed that a number of our young people have been very successful in this particular area and plying their trades in Canada and stuff, and we want to be able to come in a more structured way to give it a boost. But like you said, you're changing how things were done in the past, and so it will take a little time to get these things done, because what you really want is to be able to have these programs be sustainable and not just have it and then it's finished and then you're wondering what happens next. So we're taking our time, and it might seem like nothing is happening, but the truth is that there's a lot of meetings, a lot of negotiations that are going on to help build out these particular programs. I'm going to ask Mrs. Carol Roberts-Reefer to come now to speak a little bit on the cultural training programs, because those are also part and parcels of what we want to do, and using this year of regathering to again fuel the creative economy, because if we can have more of these groups, more musicians, more visual artists, more other people, it gives us an opportunity then employment for one, in terms of the creatives and cultural industries, but it also gives the ministry the fuel that it needs for our engagements with Ghana and Western Africa in terms of developing those markets for those persons who are cultural. With Ms. Roberts-Reefer.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, the National Community Cultural Training Program has been a long time coming, and deliberately so, as we try to ensure that we can roll out a program that will touch every parish and multiple communities in every parish, that would represent the kind of cultural interests that young people in these communities would want, and also would be the culmination of a number of collaborations with agencies and ministries and NGOs of like mind. The National Community Cultural Training Program has a very small but very critical set of objectives. It wants to ensure that the young people that enroll in its programs come away with a sense of belonging. Let me go back a little bit again. At close to the end, almost a year ago, at the end of the last financial year, Sports and Culture, through its ministry, received a portion of discretionary funds specifically for the rolling out of training programs in sports and culture. At that time, a number of reasons were given as to why these programs were important. One was that young people felt that they did not have that sense of belonging to something that was structured and organized outside of church, outside of school, outside of the home. In doing our field research, we also found that a lot of young people are also searching for a sense of validation that they are good at something. We have a system in this country where if you are young, a student, and you are good, we automatically assume that you're good. Trying your hand at something while trying to conform to be good at academics, and if and when you fail, then you feel as though you have not achieved. These cultural programs are aimed at giving those young people who register and stay the course. I'm a member for the city of Bridgetown speaking, and I think that we are close enough in age that we both remember this who are interested in being practitioners in the creative economy. Yes, they want to engage in training opportunities, but they ask one question every time. After this, what next? We've just come through the NIFCA exercise and we've had a NIFCA review meeting, and the most oft-repeated question is, after NIFCA, what next? And these training programs are also specifically designed to show them how they can make a living after the training. They can make a living in their communities, they can make a living on the national level, but equally as important, the opportunity for them to make their dreams as large as possible on the global stage and then make them come true. There's absolutely nothing stopping any young person who is interested in gaming or joinery or videography or music in thinking that they're only producing products for their community and their country. There's a, to use that phrase, a brave new world out there, and the possibilities are endless. And so the National Community Cultural Training Program looks and offers training opportunities, training and development opportunities in a number of disciplines, including music. And music is just not music instrumentation, but also music production. So all those young people who are hearing beats in their head and who are humming songs and producing chants at inter-school sports and producing all of these music videos that we see that spring up just like that on Instagram. There's also music production. There's the visual arts in terms of producing murals, the traditional painting, there's sculpting, but then there's also pottery, where we are going to be rolling out a community kiln program, where in specific communities, the master artist, Rasakem, will actually be teaching young people how to literally make their own kilns and then fire their own pottery. I don't have to go into too much detail as to the possibilities of a project like that. We have craft in terms of basketry and weaving and hand painting fabric and tie-dyeing. There's joinery, because our research tells us that there is an authentic Bajan style to producing furniture, and so we'll be doing joinery. There is makeup, both for theater and then just general aesthetics. You only need to have a major event in Barbados, and you know that a lot of young women are actually already making a living from offering makeup and aesthetic services for major events. There is gaming, not gaming and betting, but gaming and animation. There is already a fledgling but very promising industry in animation and gaming, where young people are staying at home or they're getting together, tables probably no larger than this table, and they're creating video games and shells for video games, and they're doing animation, and they are exporting their product and their content, and they're making a living, and we want to expand on that by teaching that in communities. There's Afro-Caribbean dance. This is, again, a deliberate choice. There's a lot of ballet, there's a lot of ballroom, there is a lot of modern And we strongly feel that there is a need, and the field studies show this, that there is not as much emphasis on African dance, Caribbean dance, and Afro-Caribbean dance vocabularies as there should be. So that will also be one of the disciplines taught. There's theater. We used to have a thriving theater community, both in terms of audiences, people willing to pay to go to watch theatrical productions, but also people writing and producing plays. That has waned over a number of years, and we are going right back into the community where a lot of it first started to rejuvenate that discipline as well. And then there is videography. You cannot be a child or a creature of social media and information technology and not understand that every single device that you currently use, every single electronic device that you currently use has the potential for you to create content, to become a creator of content. That's all well and good. We could take our selfies and we could film our relatives doing things and even some of the negative things that you see, but there is a value to it. You can take those same devices and you can create content, not only to make a living this time, but also to tell stories, because a crucial part of this training program is also to feed right back into what our minister has been talking about, and that is the whole question of self-esteem, national identity, and national consciousness. There are histories that need to be taught. There are stories that need to be told. There are outstanding Barbadians that need to be acknowledged and honored, and to get a national endorsement by it, especially a national youth endorsement for all of these things, the history books will not suffice. The classroom setting will not suffice. These stories will be told and best accepted through arts and culture. The songs about them, the films about them, the storybooks and coloring books about them, the plays about them, the masquerade parades and costumes about them. That is how we are going to be able to tell our story to ourselves. And so the training program, we have all of our tutors and master tutors in place. They've been recruited. They have actually created some wonderful curricula. We have done all of the collaborative work with agencies such as Community Development, who have advised us as to the list of community centers that we can use. We've also had great participation from BIDC, who have come on board and made available some warehouse space for us in Pelican. We are about now to engage the Community Independent Secretariat and also other agencies to be able not to infiltrate communities, but to be welcomed into communities so that we can get the work done. Another critical part of this program is the sense of not only passing on skills, but mentorship. In communities of old, again, from my generation, there was always somebody who would bring you along, whether it was your Sunday school teacher, your school teacher, someone that you didn't quite like, but your parents said you had to respect them because they never not saw when you were up to no good. There was always somebody who brought you along, and occasionally. And a critical part of this program, ma'am, is also the opportunity for artists and artisans who've made a living and a name for themselves out of these pursuits to pass on not only their skills, but also the life lessons. How you pick yourself up when you fall, how you do that after your first failure, how you keep doing it again and again, how you engage with members of your community, how you save money, how you then to pass on what you've learned to someone else, how you never give up. And so the master artists and coordinators chosen have also been chosen because they are accustomed working with young people, vulnerable young people, at-risk young people, young people who've been marginalized and sent from classrooms and told, well, not you because you don't have any behavior. Young people who, when they get home from school on evenings, are walking into empty homes and staying in those empty homes from hours and hours on end. And if they're not in those empty homes where they're going outside and sometimes getting up to no good. And so in music, we have, if I may be indulged to go through the list of just a few, in music, we have Wayne
Not for too much
Punkabillock.
longer, though. Sorry.
No problem, ma'am. We have the likes of Wayne Punkabillock and Dr. Stefan Walcott and Mike Seeley. In visual arts, I would have mentioned Rasa Kem. There's also Omawali Stewart and Arlette St. Hill, Irika Jelani and Sylvester Clark in craft. In gaming, Steve Fungafat, Kelvin Carvalho, Gene Carson, and Aisha Comingshong in dance, Winston Farrell and Isil Phillips and Adrian Green in theater, Ronnie Carrington, Selwyn Brown, and Damian Pinder in videography. We're going to launch this program on Friday of this week. There'll be a brief period of about 10 days for registration, and teaching starts bright and early on March 23rd. All of the sessions are free of charge, and we are ready to go. It's all about transformation.
What are the age groups here? I keep hearing you mention the youth, the youth, the youth. Meanwhile, there are people that are not considered youth anymore, differently young, if I may say, that are at home in the 50s. Maybe, and it may be made me aware of this. We have exhibitions every year where we can see the talent of older people. Are you involving any of these older people?
The age group for this program, ma'am, is specific, between 15 and 25, because of the rationale behind the need for the program in the first place. To act for these disciplines, for the arts and culture, and then with my colleague Neil Merle in sports, to act as a catalyst for change, to pull back young people, to save those young people. And as I mentioned in the objectives, a critical component is that sense of validation that you're showing a young person that they can be good at something.
But is there anything in the plan for the older
For this program,
person?
at the moment, no. For other programs under the ambit of the National Cultural Foundation, of course, yes.
Wonderful. Honorable Leader for the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to perhaps take us back a little to matters of heritage. There was a program embarked upon by the last Barbados Labour Party administration, the last one, erection of monuments, our national heroes. We've done, what, there are about 4 of them, maybe 5. I'm just wondering where we are, if the ministry has in view the furtherance of that program, because there are some of our national heroes who are not celebrated with any established monuments. That's one question. The Pan-African Commission, whether one recognizes the worth of its work then, I think it was one of the early casualties of a fellow called Burke. And I'm just inquiring as to what is the current vehicle, the new vehicle that drives our sense of Africa. It helps us to further our understanding of African heritage. It helps with the development of links with Africa. The third question has to do with one Rihanna. And I am wondering if the Honorable Minister would be willing to recommend to the government that something of a more significant memorial, for lack of a better word, she's still very much with us, but I hope that term is understood in this context. Somewhat of a more significant memorial is established in her honor. What was done by the last administration in office was apparently a last-minute effort to court some support in an area of St. Michael West from which Rihanna comes. It's associated with her and her upbringing. And much work was done to some of the housing stock in the area at the time, some painting, etc. Simply an attempt to use, I think, her name, her contribution, her association with the Paris Gap area, the Westbury Road area, to gain some political support at the time. And I'm not criticizing that. That was perhaps a politically prudent thing to do. But I think a more genuine signal ought to be sent to young people across Barbados that they can achieve. And I think her life is to be, and her contribution thus far, her achievement, is to be celebrated. Let me put it that way. We are taught, I think, a few things that young people need to hear, to know. Humble beginnings do not prescribe the ceilings to which you can aspire. I think it is also true that young people need to understand that the world is now our space. The world is now their space. And that we're not limited to Barbados. I think the important lesson must be had by young people. A small size cannot be a defining constraint. And one might want to put the argument that what Rihanna does, she does to advance Rihanna. It is an area of endeavor in which she has Can the clerical staff be put out of Parliament? Seriously, I wonder if the Honourable Minister has given this some thought and will be prepared to advise his colleagues that some serious consideration should be given to a signal honor which goes beyond the tokenism of the effort of the last administration, because the contribution is humongous, her achievement is beyond stellar, and should serve as an inspiration to all Barbadian young population that you can rise beyond the circumstances of your moment and achieve your place in the firmament of this world. I seriously think that that ought to be considered. So I'm asking about that. I'm asking about the matter of our monuments in honor of our national heroes, and we're going with that. And the other thing is, what is the vehicle that we're now using to help us to derive a further sense of our Africanness and our African heritage?
Thank you very much for your questions. So let me start with the first one, which was about the monuments. At this juncture, we have not yet looked at producing monuments, as I think people would expect, huge monuments to our national heroes. As you would know, there are a few already that have already been established. But this is something that, going forward, and I like the suggestion, is something that we can look at. But it's not just a matter of monuments in the way people see it most of the time, is these huge elaborate things. I know when the first Heroes Day was put on, there were a number of paintings which you can consider as monuments themselves for the national heroes. But yes, we can take it a step beyond. But again, most things are dependent on the available funds to do these things. And I think for me personally, I think these are things that you have to put into a wider context in terms of having more public engagement, in terms of how you pursue such activities. But I do take the concern of the leader of the opposition. Let's talk about what drives the African consciousness. I think there has been in this country for a very long time. I don't want to use the word yearning, but that's the only word that comes to mind right now. For people of African descent to have a greater knowledge of themselves. A lot of what we've been taught in schools, and I dare anyone to contest me on this, has been from a Eurocentric viewpoint in terms of our education. And so therefore, a lot of the things that we aspire to are things that have been handed to us, and oftentimes the true story of ourselves is never taught. Now, I've just returned to Barbados from Guyana, and there is a story that I have seen at Grove's Plantation of a prince, and I think Minister Prescott made mention of it, who was basically kidnapped and sent to Barbados. Now, the story that we have in Barbados is completely different than the story that I got from the persons in Guyana. In fact, they were so gracious, they even gave us an actual picture to bring home with the things out of a university. I think it's Howard, yeah, where they found this information, completely different to what we've been told here in Barbados. So there is this yearning with the advent of DNA testing and the whole idea of tracing one's history, genealogy, and thing. A lot of Barbadians have been themselves online, and these discussions go on social media for a long time. And if you pay any attention to what's happening out there, over the last probably 15, 20 years, we've been celebrating African Awareness Month, and various people in communities have been doing things. So there's nothing that the ministry has to do at this point in time to drive this awareness and consciousness, because it's inherent, it's organically there. I think what we have to do is to be in the forefront of giving it expression. And so therefore you have the season of emancipation, and for me, it has to go beyond a month or a season, but this has to be an everyday occurrence. And this is where the Ministry of Education will have a very important role to play in the whole process of having the history of our people, and not just the transatlantic slave experience, because I often say to people that the people who came here, they were not slaves. They were enslaved, which are two complete different things. You're talking about people who were scientists, people who were lawyers, people who were all kings and queens. They're put into slavery. And so if we continue to look at this as a monthly thing, that you only talk about yourselves and your history, and it starts at slavery, we'll be doing ourselves a disservice. And so the ministry has, again, come into a space where there were a number of initiatives by the Pan-African Commission that were going on in schools and different things, a number of books that we have found that were given out to things. And we have to pick up from where that has left off and get that information into the school system, because I think that is where you really begin to make the change. But we also need to get out into the communities, and you will see one of the things that in part of the programs, there's an emphasis on drumming. Now, when we see drumming, when we experience drumming, we always look at it as just entertainment. What you don't know that oftentimes there are other things attached to these different rhythms and different and ceremonies and different things. So these are part and parcel of the educational exercises that we're going to be undertaking. In fact, we've actually restoring a number of drums that we found from the same Pan-African Commission. And once we begin the program of that, whilst we were in Ghana, we talked to them about being able to bring down master drummers to teach our young people, old people, whoever is interested in the art of drumming, because it would have evolved from what we know, the remnants that have been left with us. It would have evolved on the continent for years. And then the other interesting thing that we saw when we were in Ghana is that going into Parliament, in terms of how they introduce the speaker and other persons, there was drumming. 8-foot tall talking drums in Parliament. Now, if you go into the Parliament that we go into, it is very Eurocentric in its identity. Now, here comes, I might be trotting on unstable ground here. But as an African people, we must be able at some point in time to identify ourselves with all of these other things, these other symbols. You know, I mean, there was singing in Parliament, you know, when we were in Ghana. People were actually singing. So it's a different experience, and I would agree with the Honorable Leader of the Opposition that these are things that we need to do, but we've started the process. We have the season of emancipation where we're doing, but we will be doing more as we go along in terms of the training and getting those books and information out there. And Ms. Roberts-Reefer talked about animation. Our young people today are very visual. And one of the things that we have to do is to engage with our filmmakers to actually produce the documentaries and the films and the different things that speak to us about our history, of true history, and about the accomplishments that we have done. And this is exactly what we're doing through the Film Commission and the Film Censorship Board in building those relationships that we begin to get the content that Ms. Reefer talked about out there to the general public. So,
thank you.
On the last one I have to deal with is, ma'am, sorry, is for Rihanna. I think that is a very good suggestion, but I also know that there are a long line of Barbadians prior to Rihanna that we also need to have some sort of monuments or something tangible to. One that will come to mind if you talk about music would be someone like Jackie Opel, you know, and I think these are things that we're going to have to, again, speak to the wider public and get a sense of which are the ones which have that sort of closeness to them, and let them be the ones who decide which ones we do first. But I agree with you that these are things that need to be done if we are serious about creating that national identity and self-pride that we speak about.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, just to say I appreciate what the minister shared with us relative to his own sentiments, the African heritage and furtherance of our understanding and appreciation of that. But I don't agree with him that we should seek to do that without some very prominent institutional mechanism. It doesn't have to be an institution in the sense of setting up a secretariat, having this and having that, but you need to have an institutional mechanism of which people are aware, which is charged significantly so with the responsibility of driving this process. I also don't agree with the minister on the matter of sequence and chronology or chronological order when it comes to the establishment of honors or monuments. Jackie Opel, fine, that I can appreciate that. Rihanna, talking about two different worlds in my view.
There's nothing wrong with agreeing to disagree.
Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wish to commend the Honourable Minister and his team for some improvements that I have seen over the past year in the Ministry of Culture, and pray that they will continue to focus more on community efforts, since there are a lot of people in communities who have rich talents, but they just need to have them honed. And therefore, the perspective that was outlined by the chief executive officer really suits the kind of activity that needs to be injected into our communities. I want, though, ma'am, to express a personal set of gratitudes on behalf of myself and the residents of St. Thomas, but more particularly Rock Hall, because we have seen a transformation in that area. And I'm talking Rock Hall, St. Thomas, with the Freedom Village Monument and the environs that were left in the most ridiculous of conditions over the past few years, despite efforts by the last administration to build some kiosks where they felt like doing them and not to suit the project that was designed. I thought that it was a good gesture, but it proved that there was so much shoddy work being done that most of those kiosks now have to be upgraded and replaced. It's a waste of the taxpayers' money that was injected there, and then they were left to fall apart. I am proud because I've seen an injection of work and services being put in place again, and for Vision 2020, we want to be able to use that area of the Freedom Village to be able to welcome visitors and locals alike to that location for entertainment and enlightenment. It is a pity that the government's money was spent in the way. As far as I can average it, it is more than $2 million that the last administration would have thrown at the same project, the same location, twice over a 3 to 4 year period. And I believe that the Auditor General should really make efforts to find out where the money went, and somebody has to account for the taxpayers' money. So I would want to find out from the minister what can be done in an investigation for, and I believe the Auditor General will have to do that, because it is an abomination for funds of that amount to be spent and not a single young man or young woman from Rock Hall Freedom Village to be even called as a carpenter or mason or general worker when that project was going on, and it was going on twice. But the spirits of the residents are being rekindled, and I am thankful that that effort has been made. The other question I would wish to put on the table, I put all of them one time because I may not get my time again like before. I am happy to know that there will be synergies with the other government entities, and I know that there is a dearth of knowledge among our aged and more experienced persons that can be shared with students and others in the villages where we live. So I am happy that the community centers' keys and the pavilion's keys will be handed over to responsible individuals in the communities to take responsibility. That is what it was before, and it is sad that we have changed up everything. I don't know if it was to do with giving employment to help other persons to be able to feed their families, but it took away the empowerment or the power, I would say, that residents would have had before to make sure that the facilities would have been used for the purpose of engaging people, let them get an opportunity to practice their various skills, whether it be in playing table tennis or cricket or whatever the activity, and that was taken away, and they now have to go through a system where, for example, all those folks who are living on the borders of the content pavilion have absolutely no access in the evening. And it runs across the entire Barbados. So I'm glad that that vision is unfolding, and the activities will now take place where the council will want to ensure that the facilities are open in the evening, 3 o'clock till 8:30, whatever, rather than open during school time, when the little children are at school and cannot use it, but when they come home in the evenings, they want to run around, they want to play, they want to learn, do lessons, they want to learn certain skills, and so I hope that the whole shift will help us to be able to keep our young people engaged. The guys could not access it. The man came from Christchurch East, wherever the honorable member is from, because that was where the minister lived. And to get from there to St. Thomas, no opening of that community, that pavilion or anything being done at the pavilion at Content for about 4 or 5 years. So the residents went ahead and they built a little shanty on the border. And that is where they congregate. And you know, once they're congregating there, everything is not going to be wholesome. But every time I pass and they made a query and they made a colleague heard, well, they say that the man doesn't come to work. Therefore, I hope that whoever is assigned there now will come to work, because I'll be making queries and I'll be making sure that the folks over there, who are people too, get that opportunity. Because nothing was done for the northern parishes in the last 10 years as a result of the constituencies being the ones that voted for the Barbados Labour Party. So St. James, St. Peter, St. Andrew, St. Joseph, St. Thomas, we were all neglected. The only constituency that got anything was St. Lucie, because that was not a BLP managed constituency. So we're now seeing changes, and I'm grateful to the minister. And ma'am, if you will let me give my final comment, my final question. I am saddened that under the last administration, the Cultural Industries Bill was passed, the act was passed. And it has in some serious components, because I believe that these implements, whatever you want to call them, that have historical and heritage value, are not packed in a box and shipped away to another country, or are not put in somebody's house, or are not sold to whoever for the large amount of money. And I have a serious problem, having made some queries over the last 4 years to try to find out where are the chandeliers from Government House that were replaced to the tune of almost $100,000. And when I made the query, to the credit of the former Governor General, he said he heard me, and he made a query. He was told that they're in the storeroom at Government House. I want for this ministry to be able to do an investigation to find out where those chandeliers are, because you're talking chandeliers are more than 150 years old. And there are somewhere in a room in somebody's house shipped out of the country. It is wrong for the taxpayers of Barbados and their funds to be spent in that way. And nobody can tell where those beautiful heritage, cultural, expensive chandeliers have been placed. And I want for the minister and his team to do whatever investigation to be able to retrieve them. And if they're in somebody's house, well, then you know, some penalty, because the Cultural Industries Act speaks to that kind of thievery and different things happening to cultural aspects of things. And as I close, I want it done because the Parliament of Barbados managers requested those chandeliers for Parliament when the project was conceived and it was instituted. And to this day, not a single word. If people are going to steal parts from buses and diesels and so on, and have to be suspended or have to pay a penalty, whoever has got those chandeliers, ma'am, needs to bring them back and let them go where they should be, so the entire Barbados can see them in Parliament, and they're used for the purpose for which they were used, because it was willy-nilly to remove them from Government House at the time when they were moved. And I want for that to happen, because a young man stealing a salt bread, carrying away a little bottle of rum, he gets locked up. And unless we make sure that justice is given and extended across the board, then our ordinary folk will feel there are laws for them and different laws for us, and we are being penalized and we are being chastised and we are being locked up for small things when big things are happening and people are not being charged. I believe that justice should prevail, and that the examples that are being set by adults and leaders will be examples that young people can emulate and change their lives around. And therefore, I like the Honourable Minister to give me some kind of direction, what plan is there to retrieve whatever money was spent at Rock Hall Freedom Village and spent in somebody's pocket where it did not go towards the project and left us in St. Thomas suffering and so on, as well as the money, the chandeliers that are a part of our culture and our heritage that have been put somewhere and nobody knows. I would need for it to be brought to the fore. And those are my queries, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Minister. But let me assure you that on the issue of Rock Hall, that the PS will, under, you know, I have to smile. But the PS will speak to the Auditor General, and we will have to get a special audit done on that. There are a lot of things that we came and found that, as you quite rightly said, were very strange, to say the least. But we are definitely going to be doing that. In terms of the chandeliers, I think we are also going to have to go back and look at a lot of the files to see when these chandeliers were bought, because this is very new information for me as a new minister about these chandeliers. So we will have to get our hands on those particular documents in order to see what we can do. But I would agree with you that it doesn't matter which level of the society you are at, you are accountable. And so therefore, if there is proof of persons stealing these chandeliers, then this ministry will have to go all out to make sure that they're returned and those persons are brought before the relevant authorities to deal with it. But you also talked about the Cultural Industries Act, and there are a number of things that we were able to do in a short space of time coming into the office, which I will let the CEO of the NCF talk about, because they're the ones who are executing a lot of this stuff where that act is concerned.
Thank you very much, sir. The Ministry of Creative Economy, Culture and Sports, with great guidance from the Ministry of Finance last year on the 3rd of June, was able to announce to the public and to cultural practitioners in particular that henceforth there would be an easier way to access the suite of concessions. In the past, the process would have been quite laborious and, of course, took a tremendous amount of time. The nature of a lot of the requests for duty-free concessions by our practitioners, the reason why they need to get their goods and materials in is because of the time-sensitive nature of the pursuits in which they're engaged. We were able to create a process and a policy that simply requires cultural practitioners now to register with the National Cultural Foundation, bring the documentation from their brokers showing the value of the items that they are bringing in, the VAT and the duties accrued on the cost of these items, have the ministry, Minister King, sign off on the application, and then share that information using digital technology with the Customs and Excise Department and the Barbados Revenue Authority. Yes, there were some teething pains, as was expected initially, but to date we can report that this process generally is running smoothly, and for the crop over period alone, we're estimating that cultural practitioners would have saved upwards of $500,000 in duty-free concessions. That is for last year alone.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and report progress to the Speaker.
Seconder? Anyone? Someone wants a second? Question is, I do now leave the chair and report to Honorable Speaker progress and ask for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Chairman of the Standing Finance Committee has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honorable Leader of the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the House be suspended until 10 minutes past 6.
The question is that this honorable chamber stands suspended until 10 after 6 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 10 minutes after 6.